believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Rika the Rendis, also known as Ricky Franz, and a great episode for you today. I'm going to tell you very little about my guest because it's a long conversation and we go into basically as much as he would like to disclose. He's a whistleblower who works for a secretive intel group. We go into all that and more. He has some really interesting intel on so many of the major events going on all over the world. Very intelligent guy, very intelligent conversation. He shares a lot of knowledge and wisdom from his experiences. And thank you so much for our mutual friend for hooking us up. That's kind of one of the beautiful things about having this podcast and doing it for as long as I've been doing it, is that now I get a lot of guest requests for the Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I can't have everybody on with limited time. I need to only schedule the guests and the people that I truly think I'm going to enjoy talking to, and people that I'm already familiar with in many cases. As many of you guys know, this isn't my full-time gig yet. It's still a passion project. So I do my best to try to keep the show fun, interesting, and keep feeding my curiosity. With that said, this is a value for value show. If you get some value out of these amazing conversations that I bring to you, please consider giving some value back. If you can, take 2 seconds out of your day to write a review on iTunes, Spotify, on any of the platforms that you listen to the Ripple Effect Podcast. Also, subscribe to the show on all the platforms we're on, and we're on tons of platforms. We're on every audio platform and many video platforms like Rumble, Band.video, Rockfin, BitChute. And if you're one of those guys that are still using YouTube for your podcast, or Spotify or iTunes, check out some of these other platforms. Check out Podcast Addict for all your audio podcasts, or check out Rumble or Rockfin. You can download the apps, and the cool thing about Rumble or Rockfin is that you can actually watch the video, and if you leave the app or close the app, the audio will still continue to play. So you have the ability to decide to watch the video or just listen to audio without going into another app or having to start the podcast over. So please check that out. And also, Rockfin is a great way of contributing to podcasts you enjoy, because all my Ripple Effect Podcast episodes are there for free. There's tons of other great content creators on Rockfin. And just by streaming the show on Rockfin, they contribute crypto to the content creators. So just by watching and listening to the Ripple Effect Podcast on Rockfin, you're contributing to the show, and also gives you the ability to tip a episode. So if there's a specific episode that you really enjoy, you can tip that specific show. So it's another great way of contributing. But like I said, if you can't financially contribute, please remember to rate, review, share the show on all the social media platforms you're on, create clips and share that stuff. But if you can financially support the show, if you're in a good financial situation, please consider financially supporting the show. You can donate as little as $1 a month on Patreon, and that goes a long way. If a small percentage of the listeners donated as little as $1 a month on Patreon, I could do the show full time. So no donation is too little. If you want to send a one-time donation, we have a PayPal account. We have a Venmo. We also have a crypto wallet if you want to send Bitcoin or Ethereum. Another perk of joining us on Patreon is if you want to be on the show, if you donate as little as $1 a month, you can participate in our Patreon podcast. It's a podcast I do once a month exclusively with my Patreon supporters. Then I release it as a Ripple Effect Podcast episode. Another great way of supporting the show is checking out our sponsors. The first one, and probably one of the most important ones, is Content Safe. Matt, the creator of Content Safe, has been on the show a bunch. He's also been on The Union of Unwanted, my other show I host with Sam Tripoli, Charlie Robinson, and Midnight Mike. And what Content Safe does is I upload my videos to one platform. For example, I upload my video, my thumbnail, my description to a new episode on my Odyssey channel. And then within 24 hours, it appears on my Band.video channel, on my Rockfin channel, on my Rumble channel, on my BitChute channel. You kind of get my point. It appears on all my other channels on all the other platforms. So it saves me tons of time in uploading. Content Safe also created and manages my website, therippleeffectpodcast.com, and they have plenty of other services. So if you're a podcaster, streamer, YouTuber, check out Content Safe, talk to Matt, let him know you're a listener of the Ripple Effect Podcast, and he'll hook you up. Another sponsor is the University of Reason, created by Richard Grove. He's the host of the Grand Theft World podcast. He's also the creator of the Tragedy and Hope website. He was also the writer and producer of one of my favorite documentaries called The State of Mind, The Psychology of Control. And he's also a frequent guest on this show and the Union of the Unwanted. And he creates something called the University of Reason and these very popular autonomy courses, which actually Matt from Content Safe has taken. The University of Reason is a great way of connecting with a freedom-minded community. And also, if you're at a crossroads in life, if you're looking to expand on some skills, learn some new skills, meet some people, network, check out the University of Reason. All the links are in the show description, and you can help yourself and help the Ripple Effect Podcast at the same time. The last sponsor is Element Electrolytes, created by Rob Wolf, who is a OG in the paleo and keto community. He's one of the most respected authors, documentary filmmakers, and voices in health and nutrition world. He's been on all the major podcasts, including Joe Rogan's quite a few times. So if you listen to health and nutrition podcasts, if you've watched some documentaries on health and nutrition like The Perfect Human Diet or Sacred Cow, you'll know Rob Wolf. And Rob has also been on this podcast, so go on to rippleeffectpodcast.com, search Rob Wolf, and you'll find the podcast I did with him. Or you can go on my Rumble channel, my Rockfin channel, any of these websites, and search Ripple Effect Podcast and Rob Wolf, and you'll find the episode. And Rob found that people who were doing keto, carnivore, fasting, paleo type of diets were struggling to stay hydrated. They were having headaches, muscle fatigue, so many different symptoms that were due to some of these diets. So he came up with a thing called Element Electrolytes. It's sugar-free. It's all premium ingredients. It's sweetened with the stevia leaf. It's healthy. It tastes good. You put a packet in your water. Honestly, the tastes are so strong that you could probably put a half a packet in a bottle of water. I like to do a huge bottle of water if I'm going to do the full packet. But what people don't know is that when you sweat, the electrolyte you lose the most is sodium. The majority of what you're sweating out is sodium. That's why sometimes you're like, oh, my sweat tastes salty or whatnot. So that's why his formula is specially formulated for people who are gym rats, people who are athletes, and you're doing a lot of sweating. His dosage of sodium is perfect to keep you from cramping. It'll help you optimize your mind, your body, and perform at your best. So it's perfect for the summer because if you're sweating a lot and you need to keep those electrolytes and you're looking for something healthy to drink that's not full of artificial colors and sweeteners and not full of carbs or sugar, Element Electrolytes is perfect. And it's also perfect for the winter. One, because they have a chocolate flavor if you want to put in hot cocoa or you want to put in a coffee and stay hydrated while you're having a warm drink. So that makes it perfect for a winter drink. And it's perfect for the summer because there's enough electrolytes to make a difference and keep you hydrated if you're sweating a lot. Dosage is important. The thing about a lot of these electrolyte drinks, really in all supplements and pre-workouts and a lot of this stuff on the market, is sometimes they'll have ingredients that you're looking for, but not enough of them to make a difference. So please use the link in the show description or the link on my website, rippleeffectpodcast.com. When you purchase Element Electrolytes, you get a free gift with every purchase when using that link. And also for 12 months after using that link once, you're contributing to the Ripple Effect Podcast. So thank you everybody who has purchased Element Electrolytes. Thanks everybody who's checked out my merch store and has purchased hoodies or hats or tank tops or sweaters, whatever you purchase. Thank you so much, because it's awesome to know that all around the world, there's people sporting the Ripple Effect Podcast gear, getting the word out there, getting the name out there, and helping me grow the show that I love so much. And I constantly tell myself the only difference between people who succeed and people who fail, or that the people who succeeded never gave up. And that's why I continue to do this show. I've been doing it since 2013. I'm very proud of the fan base I have, the archives I have of all the great past guests like Freeway Rick Ross, Jesse Ventura, Roger Stone, the first African-American Secret Service agent, Abraham Bolden, Glenn Jacobs, also known as Kane from WWE, ex-CIA people, ex-FBI people, all the amazing, amazing guests that I've had the privilege to sit down, have a conversation with, and then also share those conversations and interactions with you guys. With that said, enjoy this amazing conversation, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.
I've been a volunteer firefighter as well as a firefighter for 10 years. Not currently. I'm disabled now. An EMT as well as Canine Search and Rescue. I have multiple certifications from the Department of Homeland Security in disaster management as well as radiological responses, emergency management. So I mean, I'm in that wheelhouse, and what I'm doing with ARM as well as the MMUs puts me squarely in that wheelhouse right now. So I mean, I guess I would say yes. Even just before I came on here, I've got a couple videos from a contact that came in who works for the railroad around our area, and what I'm seeing is the video shows the train is rolling, but it's focused on one particular wheel in general, and it's actually got a cutout, like somebody took a welder to it, and you can see as it hits the track, it skips. And prior to my involvement in East-Palestine, like I said, I was traveling when I got the first notice from one of the firefighters. And 3 weeks prior to that, talking to somebody who's involved with ARM, I told him, I said, you know, we've had 3 thwarted attempts on rail lines, and I told him this was coming after the attacks on the power grid. And obviously, we're going to have copycats. You know what I mean? We're obviously going to have the copycat who wants to, you know, be involved, and those guys are going to get caught easy. It's these sabotage events that are disguised within the mass of it. And from what it looked like to me, early on, was that this was a sabotage event. So, yeah, I guess whistleblower would be the best thing to put it as, because it's so complicated.
Yeah, and that's why maybe a good way of starting the story is maybe starting from the beginning. Maybe seeing, like, because some people are hearing the term ARM, they don't know what ARM is, they don't know what exactly you're involved in, and of course, like, only disclose what you feel comfortable disclosing. Like we spoke previously, you'll have screen sharing ability if you want to share any photos or videos or anything you want to share whatsoever. I won't say too much about how we got connected, but we got connected. So let's start maybe from the beginning of this, because this is actually, we're talking about the derailing, but your story and you know, in some of our interactions, you know, goes back to the COVID lockdowns and all that stuff. Go back as far as you would like and share as much or as little as you would like.
Okay. So really, the lead up to what sent me to East-Palestine starts in 2019, December 17th, actually. We had just put the baby to bed, and we're sitting on our couch, and my wife's sitting there, I'm sitting there, and I get an encrypted email. I run an encrypted email, and I have multiple burners. And it's very rare for me to get an email from this friend. He's in Israel, we'll call him Shlomo. And I open it up, and it's a phylogenetic profile, it's a genomic sequencing, and it's a pneumonia. And I'm looking at this thing, and it's like, there's, in its profile, there's like 1.8% of it that just didn't sit right. It looked like AIDS. It looked like herpes. And I'm like, well, wait a minute here. This is not a, it has so many keys to attach into the human body, about 6 of them that I was seeing. And I'm like, this is not normal. So I shot the email back, and I asked him, I said, you know, are we looking at a biological weapon? Like, is this something that's being worked on? And of course he sends back, he's like, that's exactly why I sent you the email. He's like, I expected you to get this. He's like, that's what we believe it is. And he was starting, and he asked me if I would chair or be a plank member of a global intelligence medical unit that was solely dedicated to getting out factual information about what this was, because it was loose. My biggest fear was, at the moment, that this was something that was being developed that could be in play, but then I was told, no, this is absolutely in play right now, and then we had a couple links to CCTV footage. Not the stuff that was released on YouTube, actual CCTV footage. Obviously, sources and methods, we can't go into detail where they come from. This was called GLOTEL at first, Global Intelligence Resources, so GLOTEL for short. And it was invite only. You had to be a member of an S2 and the intelligence community. You had to have a medical background. You had to know what you were looking at and what we were dealing with. And the reason I was asked is I have multiple contacts across East Europe as well as into Russia. Limited footprint in Asia, but I do have, at the time I had some access agents that I could absolutely utilize, and I did in Australia before they got really hit with the lockdowns. So it went from literally assessing the virus and then predictive analysis of what was to come. I remember putting my first paper out in January, like within the first week, and I was like, you know, Beijing is not just locking down a major city like that just to destroy its economy. Like there's something here that we're missing. We didn't know how bad it was going to be. So obviously erring on the side of caution, you know, we built up the trauma bags here at home. Obviously with both of us in healthcare, we got the intubation kit, stuff like that. And I had reached out to our local fire department, and even at that time, I was like, you know, we need to be prepared. I don't know how bad it's going to be because, you know, our CFR, we were looking somewhere between 3.5 and 10 at the time because information was limited because the Chinese absolutely controlled the narrative at the point. Even getting information out of China was difficult, but not insurmountable. The Chinese aren't as good as what they think they are. From there, unfortunately, you know, our fire departments and our local representatives wanted to follow the CDC protocols. It ended up being, you know, I was hitting a 92% accuracy rating with my analysis, and even my boss, if you will, because it's a nonprofit, was like, that's unheard of. He's like, I don't know how you process information like this and are able to, you know, branch out. And I told him it's okay. My mom was Miss Cleo. I just don't mind the light skin. From there, I had warned everybody that the lockdowns were coming. We were going to be locked down. This was going to change the face of human history forever. Absolutely change the course of human history. I remember being called every name in the book, from a doomsayer to I don't know what we can say on the podcast, you know what I mean? But they just were not nice words.
It's uncensored, yes.
Okay, all right, Mazel Tov. I was called a retard. I was called stupid. And I mean, I've put years of research into this. When we noticed that it was starting to mutate, what happened in Italy, what happened in China, we knew it was a biological weapon from the get-go. We watched them even move on Google Maps the distance between the wet market and the Wuhan Institute of Virology. We started digging. We identified the first case. U.S. intelligence should have known this, but the first case we ever identified was in a French soldier who had went to the Wuhan military games in November. He had come back from Wuhan and he was sick. It was a double lower lobe pneumonia, an infection. And we were like, okay, this is what's going to progress. This is what's going to happen. If this is what we can look forward to and expect, then we're dealing with something that is a massive pandemic. But we also knew that this was an RNA-based virus, so it was going to mutate down. Viruses in the wild, naturally occurring viruses, do not usually mutate upwards to become more lethal, so on and so forth. Obviously, transmissibility is what it wants. It wants to reproduce, so therefore it stays moving. If it kills its subject too fast, then obviously it's going to die out, right? So we didn't expect it to be too bad, and the lockdowns were just an overreaction. An overreaction, best case scenario. Worst case scenario was this was absolutely planned, and if you sit down and look at it from how would you beat the civilian population, if you look at what some people want to say is the globalist agenda, so on and so forth, the WEF, whatever, how would you even subdue a population like the United States of America that has the most firearms in the world? How do you defeat a standing army before that? And that's where I ended up branching out into predictive analysis on the socioeconomic, economic and political side of it as well. One of my papers that I published with the group and inside of the community was the rise of authoritarianism under the guise of public health. It pretty much predicted January 6th. Like, it was like, this was going to happen. It's going to be a false flag. We're going to have an event, something like this. And then these people are going to be labeled terrorists, even people inside of Congress. And here at home, when we were locked down, our police departments, as well as our volunteer fire departments, had stated that certain calls they weren't going to respond to, or they couldn't because of the lockdowns. So we spent every single stimulus check, we spent out of pocket everything at first to build up mobile field hospitals. Like, we were able to respond to people in our community, especially the elderly who had nobody else, or children were moved away and they can't get to a hospital, and even those later on who would be denied entry to the hospital or care because they didn't get the pokey. So we did that multiple times. We actually ended up, thanks to the work we did in 2019 and leading up to it, developed a working field intervention for this and a few other things, actually, it works on. It was called M21, and it's gone through subsequent refining. And we found when we administered these doses to the patients, you're talking symptoms and fever were gone within 4 hours. And this was stuff that was readily available in 2020. You know what I mean? When we're talking about mixing the melatonin, when we're talking about the Math Plus protocols, you could do that at home. But yet, every single thing that we had published was censored. Every single thing that we had done, we were threatened with arrest, killings, doxings. And now everything that we had said was coming, or what was factual at the time, including ivermectin, which we have a huge stock of, has come to pass. Like, we know this is a thing. This is what treats it. So with the MMUs and then that, it led to literally a group of individuals, like a cellular network, if you will. No real leadership, no names, no tags, no nothing, no online presence, none of this Proud Boy threeper. This isn't a LARPing campaign. Everybody involved knows the hazards. Everybody involved knows what we're facing. We ended up getting together and said, you know what, well, we have to understand that the government, as well as social media and media in general, is turning against us. We are the enemy at this point. They are labeling us domestic enemies and terrorists. We were functioning as a militia, technically under the Second Amendment. So the concept was, we need to be able to protect ourselves under the Geneva Convention, because we're not a militia. We were a resistance movement. So the name came about ARM, American Resistance Movement. Medical professionals, ex-military, ex-law enforcement. We have a very good working relationship with the law enforcement in our state, in Ohio, when we went. We don't paint people with a broad paintbrush. We don't say ACAB. We understand there's bad cops, there's good cops. You know what I mean? We understand there's bad liberals, good liberals. Like, it's a mix of everybody, because every voice needs to be heard. And what a lot of the most violent and extreme on either side want to do with guns, we do with stethoscopes and microscopes. We treat the people, regardless of political affiliation, and so on and so forth. But we understood, given the scenario that we were in, eventually we would have to come to light. Eventually we would have to step out of the darkness and be like, okay, this is who we are. So we went with the Yellow Berets. We went with a designator, because under the Geneva Convention, to not be tried here in the U.S., because we realized, and this is going to sound really funny, we realized that if we could get tried in an international court, some of the countries that would absolutely back us and veto anything would be Russia, Iran, Israel, North Korea, China. They would absolutely go against the United States just to go against the United States. So we're like, okay, let's try to take advantage of that. So we took the term Yellow Beret from individuals back in the Vietnam War. Some of the doctors who didn't want to participate, so on and so forth, they were called Yellow Berets because, of course, the color yellow is associated with cowards. Instead of calling ourselves Yellow Berets, we call it the Gadsden Beret now. You know what I mean? So it's like just a yellow beret with a Betsy Ross flag and a sheath or a wreath around it. And from there, we branched out into intelligence operations, actual hands-on intelligence gathering, cultivating resources and contacts, as well as medical intervention, still a big-time focus. We organized nationally a operation called Operation Alexandria. where once they started censoring certain materials and books, we went out and we got every type of textbook you could imagine, schools shutting down, libraries. We would buy it from our own money, our own resources, and we would wrap those books, put them in a tote, wrap the tote, bury them, geocache and geotag them, and then put the coordinates on a flash drive and then put them away for future posterity's sake, just in case things got really bad. Because we're not talking about... I know that the common conception in the media and a lot of the slang that likes to get thrown around is the Gravy Seals or Meal Team 6. And you're not talking about many individuals like that. You're talking about highly educated individuals who are scared. These people aren't operating just out of the goodness of their heart. They're operating because they're terrified. As somebody who is Jewish, my mother's Jewish, she's a Moroccan Jew, I had to study the Holocaust my entire life. You know what I mean? And never again, just to understand the concept, never again. Never again doesn't mean just Israel and Jews. It means anybody, period. Muslim, blacks, Jews, whatever. And I hate it when people are like, you know, this is how the Holocaust started. No, sweetheart. We're several steps into that at this point. So we've taken means as arm to go ahead and insulate ourselves, to insulate the public as well, and to preserve our history and our culture. Not just conservative, but liberal thinkers as well, libertarians, anything, even Karl Marx. In my library, I have Das Kapital. I've read it all. You know what I mean? I want to be able to debate. I want to be as educated as possible about this. So when the East-Palestine situation happened, I was traveling for work, and I got a couple photos from a volunteer firefighter. You could say he is a whistleblower first. And he said to check into the chemicals on the train. He said they're lying. They're not telling the public what it is. He's like, there's a couple classified chemicals on here. There's some things that nothing is normal. This is not normal at all. So I passed that information along to somebody within the network. ARM itself, like I said, the one underlying principle that binds everyone within ARM is a devotion to the Constitution and truth and freedom, period. We witness, we protect, we serve. That's it. And that doesn't mean through violent means at all, because we're a very peaceful organization. We're focused on intelligence work, especially within what we see as a fifth generational war, where you don't even know who your enemy is at this point. I just actually got tagged in a work project before here all last week, and it was literally tying the Ukrainian government to a massive organized criminal banking scheme, and it was utterly insane. But I forwarded off the East-Palestine thing to a couple of the guys in other units, other organizations that do similar things as to us and have different contacts and can reach out. And they came back with pretty much the same finding, that nothing was being done. The burn that was going, nothing was controlled. In the beginning, there wasn't even really a hot zone, warm zone, cold zone set up. It was a complete clusterfuck. And coming from a background in firefighting, and I've had hazmat 1 through 3, I couldn't understand why we weren't setting these things up, like what was going on. And I was halfway across the country at the time. I was in Los Angeles. So, excuse me. I had a couple of my guys look into it, and they're like, you know, we've gotten several conflicting reports that this is the chemical, this is the chemical. The one chemical that we were certain was on board was the vinyl chloride. The next concern that popped up was dioxins. And then it came out, somebody had decided to dig a trench. And instead of trying to siphon off the chemicals or control the fire, they were going to dig a trench, dump the chemical, and burn it. So, okay, we're going to burn vinyl chloride. What we knew at the time in the first several hours of what was going on, and then subsequent days afterwards, was, so you're going to dump vinyl chloride, set it on fire, put it into the air where it's going to aerosolize, and these chemicals are going to create like an acid. So you're basically creating an acid rain. Like we're just going to turn the United States into one big, science experiment at this point in time. Congratulations, A for effort. And one of the biggest things was geography. So we've ignored multiple standard protocols for responding to a hazmat scenario. Norfolk Southern, from what we got talking and interviewing some of the firefighters on the ground, was Norfolk Southern delayed a lot of the responses out of these firefighters. A lot of them are actually understaffed. This accident couldn't have happened in a worse or better place, depending on what argument you want to go with at this point. So, a couple weeks go by. We watched the burn. We saw the images. We saw the reporter being arrested. In fact, I don't even think he was in uniform. It was the head of the Ohio National Guard, General something. I think he was in civilian plain clothing, and he's the one who initiated the assault on the reporter. And then that reporter was detained and taken out. Now, the ABC affiliate, I can't tell you what city it was, but he had been there for 5 days when I got there, and I interviewed him, and he told me the story about what happened. And the reporter was just asking questions, but apparently he was a threat, and he needed to be physically and violently removed. So when the United States government came out and stated that they were not going to be sending disaster relief or declaring an emergency for East-Palestine, Ohio, we didn't have anybody in East-Palestine at the point in time. We all agreed unanimously that things have been escalating for the past 3.5 years so bad that it was time that we made a public entrance, that we came out and we showed the public that we are here, that there is a resistance movement, and that there is something larger going on behind the scenes. So I got tasked with it because of my predictive analysis, because I have an uncanny ability. My wife will tell you it's because I'm an Aspie. Straight up, she will tell you this. My little autistic self is just, I latch onto it, and I'm like, I'm going to find out every single thing I can about it. And not to mention the fact I'm absolutely charming. So, and she will say that as well. So I make friends very easily. I got tasked with leading a team of 7 guys in from around the area. Some of us from the MMUs around here, because it didn't just stop with me. There's multiple MMUs in our area now that are fully capable and fully stocked and ready to go. So we got together, we put our money together, we did a little bit of a fundraiser because funds are running dry with inflation and everything on our end. And we got some good donations from people, and we took about $500 worth of water and foodstuffs into East Palestine. And the way we did it is we worked inward in concentric circles. So the way we were coming from, I told them, if you're 100 miles out, because we are from where I am to East Palestine, 100 miles out, we took water and oil samples from here, and that was our primary task besides delivering relief supplies, was we wanted independent soil and water samples. And we did have 2 labs to send those off to, but we took 3. So this way, obviously, if 2 tell us something different, we'll send the 3rd one off, and then the 3rd one will come back, and, we'll be able to see exactly, have an idea, a ballpark area of what we were dealing with. So in concentric circles, we work in 100 miles out, 80 miles out, 60 miles, 30 miles, until we got to East Palestine. Heading into East Palestine, I think we came in on 14, so we're coming down, and you really couldn't tell anything was wrong. And one of the things that stuck out to me is coming into East Palestine, it's all farmland. Like, it's all farmland, all of it. So I'm like, okay, there is really nothing out here but dairy farms, corn. I didn't even see any soy. I mean, it looked like it was all just cornfields. So we get into East Palestine. There's no police presence. There's no government presence whatsoever. I mean, I was shocked. Even my partner looking at me, and I mean, he's responded. He's older than me. The Reverend's much older than me, and I hope he sees this so I can say how much of an old asshole he is. He's going in there, and he's like, this just doesn't make sense. He's like, it looks like Mayberry. Like, nothing's wrong here. He's like, where's the government? Where's the trucks? Where's the response teams from Norfolk Southern? So I believe it's like Gabby's Groceries or something. We pass it, and there's a civilian-run disaster relief station. I don't know if this is the volunteers unit, or I think it's VIA is what they're called. And we went to the gas station, which is right across the tracks from it. And I said, well, we'll just drop our supplies there with those guys, because we weren't there. ARM wasn't there to set up a disaster relief station. We're there to do one job, and that was to get independent samples. So I had talked to the lady behind the counter at the gas station. She had told me where the wreck was and how I could access it. And I was shocked. I'm like, so I can walk in on foot? And she's like, yeah. She's like, they haven't cordoned it off. You can get in with vehicle or you can walk in on foot. Like I couldn't believe it, to tell you the truth. I'm like, there's no way. Once we dropped the supplies off is when I met the ABC affiliate. He had seen me, and, you know, of course, being a reporter, he asked who we were with, and I identified myself, who I was with, what my ranking was. Previous ranking, because we keep our military ranks if we're prior service. And he told me he'd been on scene for about 5 days total this time. He was here in the beginning as well, and he was sick. Like, he even said, he's like, I got bronchitis. He's like, it feels like it's hard to breathe. And there was no noticeable smell in the air at that time. There was really where we were at, there was no discernible smell to it. When we started making our rounds, I started meeting members of the community. There's 2 fire departments in East-Palestine that I noticed. They actually might be just connected, but I'm pretty sure they're separate stations. The doors were wide open. The rigs all doors were open, gear was staged, like they were ready to go again. And I asked why, and the response that I got is, we are getting an disproportional amount of calls for what we are used to getting. With 45 minutes of my boots on the ground in East-Palestine, there were 3 separate emergency EMS call-outs. I sent video to my wife, and all you could hear is sirens screaming back and forth. And I told her, I was like, you would assume, you know, what I'm looking at, you know, seeing the pictures that you did versus what you're seeing now, that this would be a war zone. And it wasn't. It was like business as usual, but in the background, there's something else going on. I met several locals. One in particular stuck out. Very nice gentleman. CPA, he retired to the East Palestine area. He actually lived 3 miles out. He came in and he was trying to talk to people at the stations. And someone directed him my way, and he asked, you know, well, you're not with the government, you're not with Norfolk Southern. And it's funny, he's an ordained reverend, but he's old school, and he looked at the guy and he's like, absolutely fucking not. He's like, we're here to tell the truth. He's like, that's as far from the government as you can get. When he found out we were there to take independent water and oil samples, he was ecstatic. He's like, you're the first ones down here that have done this. And I was taken back, and I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, everybody's been with Norfolk Southern. They've been trying to get people to sign no harm clauses, things like that. And there was a sign. I won't lie and leave that out. There was a flashing sign that said, you know, air quality tests, Norfolk Southern, call this number, so on and so forth. But there was nobody there. There was no representatives, no suits, no nothing. There was no vehicles there at all that stated Norfolk Southern, U.S. government. There was a lot of Virginia plates, including our vehicle. My work vehicle came out of Alexandria. We picked it up and then brought it in. So I was seeing a lot of Virginia plates. So my first thought was, okay, so there are government here, but I just don't know what they're doing here. This individual ended up taking us to Leslie Run. And I was like, well, that's one of the places I want to check. I want to check Leslie Run, Bull Run, so on and so forth. And as we're talking, I'm starting to flesh out and get the broad picture here. The layout of the land, the geography from the firefighters, EMS, and now the civilians on the ground told me that there was no attempt to bring this train under control. The fire, once it derailed. There was absolutely no attempt. Very, 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 very little. No thought of actually siphoning off the chemicals. It was just dig a trench, dump it in, set it on fire. No reason given. None at that time. None was given, I don't even think, up to about a week and a half ago. Where the trench was, they literally dug the trench up to Sulphur Spring. Or Sulphur Run. I can never remember which one it is. So Sulphur Run runs underneath of East-Palestine. It comes back out, flowing at the city park, East-Palestine City Park, or what you would call the city park. Sulphur Run runs into Leslie Run. So we get to the park, and there's lines of vehicles. No crews. Nothing. No crews. Nobody there. 2 pumps going, and my partner looks over. He's like, what the hell is that for? Window dressing? He's like, what are they doing? What are they even doing? They're not doing anything. And I obviously aired to his experience, because this is what he did for the longest time. We go to walk down Leslie Run. There's no smell in the air at the time. So the parking spot is well above Leslie Run. You got to walk down about, I'd say, a 70% grade to actually get to it. And from above, it didn't look bad at all. It looked normal. Once you got to it, there was no smell at the time, and it looked normal. It looked fine. There was nothing in the water. You could take a snapshot of that water. I could send it to you and tell you everything was fine. It looked good, and you'd believe it. So he's like, okay, there's 3 different crossings. They're all stone crossings, so you jump the stones, so on and so forth. And he said, go ahead. He said, walk across. So he said, pay attention. So I'm walking across. By the 3rd time, I stepped on the rock. My boot hits the rock, and it just bubbles. And as the bubbles come up, it's creating a slick. Like somebody spilled gasoline or diesel or something onto the water, and it didn't stop. It just kept bubbling up and bubbling up. And he said, you see what I mean? He's like, this is something you had to see to believe. And, I'm not a hydrologist. I'm not a geologist. But I do have a brain. I am highly educated. My first thought was, this is coming out of the ground. This isn't coming out of the water. This is coming out of the ground. The next thing that hit me was the smell. As soon as that chemical hit the surface and it just releases, the smell blanketed, I would say, at least the size of 2 studio apartments. It's a large 2 studio apartments. And it was cloying. Like, as people keep asking me, what did this smell like? And it's like, I can't even describe it to you. Industrial. I mean, the Reverend told me afterwards, the only way you can describe it is industrial. He's like, I've smelled this before. He's like, the first words out of his mouth as he's sitting there is like, yeah, tell me this fucking water's good. He's like, no, it's not. We actually had to leave. It caused breathing issues. It immediately caused a headache. No real lightheadedness. You know what I mean? Like everything in the moment was okay. So as soon as it wasn't that windy, it was sunny, it was decent. As soon as the smell dissipated, we went back down. And I think I sent you some of those videos as well, where he would take a stick and he would run it on the water and it would just plume. It was just right there. And some of the plumes, the smell didn't come. Some it did, and I couldn't figure out why. You know what I mean? And then you would go to the bank, and I dig my boot into the bank. And as you dig down into the soil, it just filled from the bottom and backflowed in. And as it did, you got that sheen on top of the water. You got that rainbow-colored sheen. So we immediately went ahead and we took soil samples, we took water samples, used a piece of PVC to actually get into the ground and take samples out. So we would hammer it in and then take from the bottom of it, 3 feet, 5 feet, 10 feet, just to see if what I suspected was real or was happening. Then we had chemicals in the ground. Like they're not coming from the waterway. They're actually coming from the ground. Like I've never seen that. I've never seen what I saw down there. And I went to Katrina. I responded with FEMA Team 1 to the Katrina cleanup. And I mean, we saw chemicals in the water there. You know what I mean? But they were noticeable. They stayed on top of the water. This wasn't. Like, you would turn over one rock and this stuff would just freely come up and just start flowing. You make your way down Leslie Run, you would look down, and trapped in the detritus and like the debris in some of the places, the water would back up, and so would the chemical. It would just sit there and it's just flowing. I don't know. I think I sent you that one too, but you could just see it just flowing. Like, it's just chemical on top of the water just flowing. And then that day in particular, excuse me, Ohio DNR was like, yeah, we haven't seen any fresh kills. And I'm like, there's a mass of them right here. And on the fish, like, I understand what fish look like underwater that have been sitting, but these are actual fresh kills. But what was growing on some of these fish and these amphibians is like a fuzz. It was like a white fuzz. Some of the salamanders, some of the frogs looked like they had chemical burns on them. And I think I sent you those pictures too. I don't remember. I might have meant to. It's just been so hectic. And then the deformities, and obviously the amphibians as well as the crayfish were starting to show loss of motor control and neurological issues. Like I could pick up a live frog and this thing can't even pick its head up. I can hold it in my hand like this and it doesn't even jump away. It just lays there. And this is what we were dealing with. The pH in the water, if we were to be honest, by some of the samples, there was no way, there was absolutely no way any fish or amphibians were going to survive. On the PA side, because East Palestine is so close, there's state game lands, and we were able to get into the state game lands as well. We were seeing dead raccoons. We were seeing dead gophers. We're not talking amphibians and fish at this point. We're talking mammalian life. And we were being told, oh, well, that's not in relation to this. I have a dead raccoon floating in the water, and you can see on the ice, it's rainbow colored. You can see bubbles frozen coming up that are rainbow colored. You can see around this raccoon that the water looks chemically contaminated. I'm not saying causation and correlation, but I'm also not saying it doesn't take a genius here to figure out what was going on. And obviously now we have reports coming out online and stuff like that. Oh, they're finding dead deer. They're finding these things. They're finding, multicolored snow. How many miles away? So obviously there was an absolute cover-up. And for a civilian organization, for a civilian resistance movement to be the first organization to show, and I mean, limited resources. I mean, we have nothing compared to the state or the federal government. You know what I mean? We're just a mom and pop, Good Samaritan organization. For us to be the first independent organization to show up and take samples, and I carried those samples to Washington, D.C. myself, that's telling. That is utterly ridiculous. I can't even believe that that's the United States. I mean, this is insane. It's insanity. The entire area, because of the way East Palestine is it's shaped like a bowl. So those chemicals are going to settle. Now, for the burn-off, you would have to go with a radiological pattern, obviously. So where we are, we're absolutely in the affected zone. And it really makes me wonder, because if we mark it like a radiological event, then our area saw significant fallout. My sister was relatively young. She did have to have a tracheotomy because of thyroid issues, but she was healthy outside of that. She, for weeks now, since that burn, her oxygen had gone down, so on and so forth. And she passed away on Tuesday. Like, her breathing just got worse and worse and worse and worse. Now, can I directly relate it to that? No, I can't. But I'm also talking about somebody who was relatively healthy. Outside of that, was relatively healthy and took very good care of herself, especially because of the situation that she was in. And obviously now we're seeing people who are getting sick. When we got to Washington, D.C. ourselves, we really didn't talk. I just thought it was because Rev's old. He's had multiple back surgeries, but he slept for 2 days, and I felt sick. I put it on. I have a TikTok where I do training. I teach about resistance operations and things like that from a passive standpoint. And I had wrote that I just didn't feel right. I woke up the next morning and I was sick. My stomach was messed up. I had some breathing problems. I was tired. My muscles hurt. I just wanted to sleep. When we compared notes that Monday, he told me the same thing. He's like, I thought it was just me. He's like, I feel like shit. I was like, no, I completely feel that. Like, I feel absolutely horrible. And it took us about a good 6-7 days just to like get back to normal. And me, like I said, relatively very good health, avid gym nut. I supplements every day, eat healthy, eat clean. So it's really rare for me to like feel that sick, like to actually feel like I have an issue. But that's pretty much it. Like, that's what we saw on the ground. That's what we found. That's what we encountered. And obviously, since we took our samples, had them done, now there have been multiple independent organizations, and the government's finally getting their ass in gear. So hopefully, we played a little bit of a role in getting that fucking ball rolling, which it should have been rolling from day one. And before we left East Palestine, something to note, on the 17th, 18th, We went to the Roadhouse. No Patrick Swayze, though. I was very sorely unimpressed with that. We went there to eat, and I overheard a couple rail fans talking. And I heard them talking about the radio communications. And Norfolk Southern knew about this issue. They knew they had a braking problem. The squawk box in the engine was going off. They were on the radio, and Norfolk Southern told them to disregard it, to keep pushing forward. By the time they got to East-Palestine, the fire was out of control. They tried slowing down, and that is what caused the derailment, because it was their braking system, and those wheels were completely shot. And then that car jumped, and that was it. The rest is history.
Yeah, I've heard about the wheel bearings overheating and that being a cause. The whole thing just seems really suspicious. There's also reports of like the people who were down there not wearing masks. They were told not to wear masks so they don't panic the residents there, which was crazy when you think about it. It's like, okay, so you're putting first responders in danger just so you don't panic everybody. Like it reminds you of September 11th when they told you the air was clean, or the fire pits in Iraq or Afghanistan where they were burning stuff, and all these military people were getting cancer and all these health issues because of it. So it seemed really intriguing. Have you do you think it was just basically neglect of some repairs, or do you think it was on purpose? I mean, after observing it and kind of taking a step back and being able to reflect on what you saw, what's your opinion on that?
Because of what I've been involved with in the nature of my predictive analysis, we're at war. We have been at war for the last 3 years. Fifth generational war, you're not going to know who your enemy is. Most of it is informational and psychological. And that would be a whole different episode to get into that type of thing. And you can see the psychological aspect of it, the division between the two sides to keep the infighting going. When I got word that I passed on to the rest of the arm units that we had 3, I knew it was coming. Okay, this is asymmetric warfare. One of the things about me prior to doing this was I taught guerrilla warfare and resistance operations in some of the worst fucking places in the world. I knew what was happening with the grid attacks, especially around Fort Bragg. That was exceptionally interesting to me, and I told everybody the railways are next. Railways, communication, water treatment. And in fact, I think we just had an attack today in Nebraska on a communications tower. So when I heard about the 3 attempted attacks, like I had told everybody else in my particular area of operations, I was going dark for a while, but pay attention to the next 2 weeks, because we did get word, and we call it rumors intelligence, that there were going to be, or was going to be, a massive event taking place. So when the derailment happened, I was like, okay, not outside the realm of possibility, let's keep an eye on it. And then I started getting the messages, I started getting the pictures, and I'm like, okay, we have a problem here. Looking at what I saw, getting up close to those tankers, getting on scene. And admittedly, when I went, I looked like I was in uniform. I was in uniform. I was in our uniform. So obviously an air of authority will get you in anywhere. But even while I was there inspecting the crash site myself, a civilian car drove right up inside there. So it wasn't just that got me in there. Anybody could have got in here. Seeing the response, hearing the stories from rail fans, credible sources, as well as some of the videos that I had just seen, I think absolutely that our infrastructure is under attack. I cannot say definitively. I can't pinpoint who is the orchestrator. And for me to even jump off the rails and say, well, it's this person, or the government, or all the government's bad, would be absolutely and incredibly irresponsible of me, because I don't have that information in front of me. Now, what I do have, based off of what I've seen, the pictures, the photos, the response, a history within this, as well as understanding asymmetric guerrilla warfare and resistance operations, this was absolutely a sabotage event. One of the biggest reasons why it's so easy is If I want to assassinate a target, and I know that's very popular in the media and Hollywood, the United States no longer assassinates targets. Let's be completely honest. You have to be high up on a platform that we can't reach for us to just be like, okay, we're going to send one of those nice little ninja hellfires through your doorway. What they do is it's called I2D2. And you'll see it a lot in counterinsurgency work, is identify your target, isolate the target, discredit the target, and then disseminate that information, okay? So essentially, break it down real fast. If you're a Muslim, and I can't really get to you, you're a pious Muslim, you're a cleric, but you're an extremist. Okay, I've already identified you as my threat. I know your name, I've got a full dossier, I know what you're into, what you do, so on and so forth. If I can exploit something, like you have a vice that is haram, okay, I can then take that and use that to discredit you. And once I discredit you, I disseminate that so no one wants to deal with you. What pious Muslim wants to follow somebody who's drinking alcohol on the weekends and flirting with shiksa, you know what I mean? And they do the same thing with the United States, inside the United States now. Again, a whole separate conversation. That has led up to these events. And the reason that you can derail a train like this and make it look natural is derailments have no real definition. If a wheel slips the track and one car goes sideways, it's a derailment, okay? So when I did my report for ARM, I said, we have to define derailment in this as East-Palestine is that's our definition of a derailment, okay? Not just, yep, it slipped. So you see 1,000 some hundred derailments a year, right? If you want to seize land, the United States does have laws on the books that if a land is too overly polluted and or inhospitable, look at Centralia, PA, the government can then come in through eminent domain, move everybody out of that area, and then seize control of that area. That entire area is arable farmland. Absolutely arable farmland. You have to put this together and piece this together with industrial sabotage, infrastructure sabotage, the fact that food processing plants as well as crops and fields have suffered, as well as, okay, 2 times in 1 week, Cessnas and Piper Cubs had flown into food processing facilities in 2022. Please tell me how normal that works. I didn't see any autopsies, any bodies, anything like that. So if you want to hide a derailment, you can easily make it look natural by hiding it in all of those 1,000 some hundred derailments that happen a year. So what you're really doing is you're hiding your intended target within the mass. You're shielding yourself within the mass to say, oh, well, just look at this accident. When in reality, what you can do then is look at who's buying up that farmland. You can step in, move the people out, which looks like it's going to happen. I'm starting to see articles, and it should. Honestly, if I'm being completely honest, I think East Palestine should be labeled inhabitable, at least for a 5-mile radius. And then you can seize control of that town and or the land around it, because you're saying, well, it's inhabitable. What could we have done? We didn't know. And then all of that goes into the hypothetical. You know what I mean? Like, why would they be doing this? What's going on? I'm sure a lot of us, I've honestly, and don't take offense, I've never heard of your podcast. I don't really watch podcasts. I know Joe Rogan, so I don't know what you've touched on in your podcast, or usually your general themes. But if you step back and look at how to defeat an army moves on its stomachs, right? Okay, so how would you defeat a resistance movement? Ban the ammunition. You can't take the guns. It's never going to happen. Okay, we knew that was coming. The gun control, the push for gun control, we know that. You're never going to be able to take the guns. Even our felons have guns, and most of us don't care as long as you don't commit a felony with it again. Okay? So what you do is you ban the ammunition. You start taking the ammunition. You start taking the body armor. You start taking away the food. If you look at the 2 main shareholders in Norfolk Southern, it's Vanguard, BlackRock. Who's been buying up all the real estate? Vanguard and BlackRock. Every single thing that has happened in this nation, Vanguard and BlackRock have been at the center of it. So while correlation is not necessarily causation, we do have a singular focus that seems to be a central theme around here. If little Jimmy is constantly coming home and getting detention, and everybody's saying, well, we don't know what little Jimmy did, but this happened to this kid got a black eye, this kid got a fat lip, this kid got sick, I'm starting to think the problem might be with little Jimmy, right? So I absolutely do believe, and from what I saw from the video today, that this was absolutely a sabotage event. It could not have happened in a more perfect location. I don't think where it happened was staged. I think the engineers tried to do the best they could do. They ignored Norfolk Southern. I think the intended target was farther down the line because of the mass amount of farmland that's there. Because this was in very close to the town, like literally within walking distance of blocks of people's blocks. But yet farther down that line, massive waterways to the Ohio River, massive farmland. So I think the engineers did exactly what they should have done. They should have done it in the first place and ignored Norfolk Southern, but you don't want to lose your job, right?
Yeah, these stories are important to tell. I've had, many whistleblowers in the past on, like Thomas Drake and the NSA whistleblower, and then Michael Susan, who was a part of the Oil for Food scandal when he was working for the UN, and the film Backstabbing for Beginners is about his story, which is pretty insane. And I've had it's just so many of these people on, and reality is stranger than fiction, and you can't make some of this stuff up. And I think sometimes the truth is, ignorance is bliss. It's like if you try to consume all this information and your worldview starts shattering, and you realize like we live in a much darker place, with many more people molding and influencing the world around you than you think. That's a lot for some people to grasp. And your first instinct sometimes is to resist that might even be true. So it's for me, like nothing is too crazy to believe. I've had Dr. Robert Epstein, who's also been on the Rogan podcast, and he was this tech guy who investigated Google and how Google was influencing and manipulating everybody's thinking and believing, and then what they saw, and just how deep it really went. And his wife had a mysterious death, and so there's like these stories over and over again of these really powerful people making sure they shut people up, and you see that too. It's like anytime you hear, I've done shows on the JFK assassination. I've done with James D. Junio and Russ Baker and others, and on 9/11, and all these stories. You always hear people, and during COVID, right? And people would be like, well, why isn't somebody saying something? It's like, well, because they're being censored. Either they're being censored, or they've been threatened, or they have mysterious deaths. But you dig a little bit, there's always people out there trying to expose the truth. You just have to find them. And usually, it's harder to find them, especially now with big tech and all that. But, if this was something that you think was intentional, is the purpose to eventually take over the land? What do you think was the motive?
I think the broad strategy at this point is the consolidation of power and the corporatism of the United States. If you control the food, you control the people, and it's consolidated globalism at this point. I think the biggest threat to the United States and the world at large is globalism. And while I'm not an avid fan of Russia's actions, I'm more of an avid fan of the fact that Russia is taking a stand against globalism, because it absolutely is a threat. I think at this point, if they are able to take, like I said, yes, they can take the land through eminent domain. They did it in Centralia. They did it in a couple other places. They did it as far back as World War II. There's a town in Pennsylvania that they took over and turned it into a TNT plant. Yeah, I mean, if they want to come in and look at what happened with Bundy Ranch. I mean, Bundy Ranch was a catalyst. It showed literally what an armed populace can do against a government bent on taking someone's rights away, to eventually be exonerated, I think. The broader strategy is the farmland. The absolute seizing of personal farmland that will not be sold. But that's just one cog in a broader strategy here. And you're right, it absolutely sounds insane. I've written many reports where I'm like, I preface it with a cover letter where I'm like, I understand how insane this sounds. Like, I get it. Only to watch points A, B, C, and then skip to E happen. And I've had multiple conversations, even with my partner, and he's like, I can't believe it. You just can't script it. You just can't. If you can control the food. What did Nero say, right? Bread and circuses. bread and circuses. As long as the people are entertained, which they are, and let's be honest, I'm not knocking you or anybody else because I use TikTok to teach, but even the podcast, it's a circus, it's an entertainment, right? People aren't getting out there and thinking. People aren't going to see with their own eyes. They'll listen to a story, but then all of a sudden it goes away because our attention span has been conditioned to be 15 seconds long now, 15 seconds to 60 seconds. And the over-sexualization of our people have stunted critical thinking. Most people just want to pass you by. They don't care about you or me. We're not sexy enough. Maybe if we wore bikinis on the show, it might get the wrong attention, but attention. They don't want to take the time to listen and use critical thinking skills, because anything that I could say, or somebody else could say, or somebody, in a different organization could say, I can give you the clues and the breadcrumbs and let you, which I normally do to newer people, because knowledge gained is more appreciated than knowledge freely given. But I wish I didn't know what I know. I wish I didn't see what I saw, because it makes it even harder to understand or believe what's coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, this is, not to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I was just going to say it's not going to get better. Like, it's just not. My 2023 has been responding to one disaster after another.
People have heard about Bill Gates buying farms and land. It does seem like there is some type of plan with controlling the food, because he's also the same one telling people to, that meat's bad for you and need to eat insects and all this processed fake food. And of course, I was born in northern Portugal in Chaves. My family are farmers, and I was born on a farm and then raised in America. But my parents still live very much the Portuguese farmer lifestyle of growing their own food, raising their own food, killing their own food. I grew up watching my parents skin a rabbit. Wasn't a big deal. I still bring my kids to the butcher shop so that, they come with me. They enjoy watching the food being cut and then seeing it being marinated and then put on a grill. Like, they're a part of the process. They understand the cycle of life. And to me, that's important, because it's like when you only buy packaged food and you lose this connection to what you're eating and how we're all a part of this process of life, eating life to survive. But it definitely seems like where everything is like one piece to a bigger puzzle, and you're seeing this transition. We've talked about transhumanism on the show. We've talked about just so much of what's going on in the world. The confusing of children. Forcing myself to have discussions with my kids when they're 5, 6, and 7 that we shouldn't be having, because they should just be kids. They shouldn't be exposed to these things to be asking these questions. I mean, if I had $1 for every Disney movie that, like, 5 minutes into it, I look at my wife and I'm like, oh, we can't watch this. I'm like, this is, you could see the propaganda just seeping out and slowly putting these little breadcrumbs. And a lot of times, like, parents think, oh, it's not a big deal. It's not this, it's not. It's like, kids are explorers, mental explorers. They're curious in nature. They want to know and understand the world, and that's why they ask questions. And sometimes you see parents who get frustrated with their kids because it's like, stop asking me this or whatever, or you respond with like a short answer. And I always take my time to be like, okay, this answer could affect the way they see the world and could have some effect in molding their worldview. So let me be really careful what I say, how I say it, and what I want to say, because this might stay with them, this might stick with them, and this might have a influence on them. But the thing is, like, media knows that too. TV knows that too. A good friend of mine, and somebody who's a regular on the show, Richard Grove, he had the Tragedy and Hope website, and then he also hosts the show Grand Theft World. He had a documentary, one of my favorite documentaries, really of any, called State of Mind, The Psychology of Control. And why that documentary was so good, it went throughout all of history on how there's always been elite trying to control people and all the different techniques, psychological techniques. Back in the day, it used to be military, and then you realize, like, okay, you can't just go around taking over countries anymore or taking over other people with violence. So now it's other tactics. And so there's, and the thing is that is always startling to me is that in ways I feel like the world is opening up to how things really work. I always used to use the example that like I feel like America is like some mild version of North Korea. Like the North Koreans have been brainwashed into believing that like, you know, their leader doesn't poop because he digests his food so well. He's this amazing athlete, like all these things. And then, you know, if they leave North Korea, they'll have their whole world will just blow up and be like, what the fuck? Like everything I thought, you know, was reality isn't reality at all. I'm like, America's not that bad, but you can kind of see similarities.
Yeah.
You know, we believe that voting matters. We believe that, and what was it, George Carlin who said that, or Mark Twain, who like if voting mattered, they wouldn't let you do it.
It's George Carlin,
yeah, George Carlin. So, it's so true. It's this false reality of like we have a choice and we have options, but those options are controlled, and those options are either left or right, or blue or red, or McDonald's or Burger King, and it's like, so you don't really have options at all. And so it's during COVID, I feel like people were waking up a little bit. Like Bill Gates, people forget, like prior to COVID, even when Joe Rogan, and you know, Joe Rogan and I have a lot of mutual friends. Sam Tripoli, who's a regular on his show, hosts another show with me called the Union of the Unwanted, which was actually a response, kind of like your group. The Union of the Unwanted show was a response to the censorship and what was going on. A bunch of us content creators are like, we're all getting censored. We're all getting kicked off YouTube and censored on Twitter and all this stuff. Like, we need to do something. And similar to what you did, we gathered a bunch of content creators and had this giant conference call. We had Luke from We Are Change, and who's also a regular on Tim Pool's show. We had Ben Swan. We had so many, James Corbett, so many amazing friends of ours all together. And we're like, what the fuck do we do? What are we experiencing, and how do we handle this? And luckily there was other platforms like Rockfin and Rumble and Band.video that grew in popularity because people couldn't go to YouTube to find anything besides the mainstream narrative. I mean, typically when I was growing up, and I don't know your age, but I'm a 1985 baby, and it's like when I was doing research initially back in the day, it was a lot of it was documentaries, but eventually, YouTube was a big source of my information. I could go on YouTube, I could find a small show, a small researcher who's really discovering some really interesting information or has a really interesting perspective on things. And I would go on YouTube to get the alternative view. And now what happens if you go on YouTube and you search anything, you search the Ohio disaster, what you're going to get is CNN, NBC, all the mainstream. It's like, if I want to get the mainstream perspective, I'll just turn on the TV. I don't come to YouTube for that. So it's thank God for these other platforms and for people who pushed back a little bit. But the amount of censorship, I mean, I had Mickey Willis on, who did the Plandemic documentary. I had Dr. Judy Mikovits was on the Union of the Unwanted with us. I had Dr. David Martin, who's on that documentary, and many others. Dr. Scott Jensen, Dr. Peter McCullough, and Dr. Robert Malone. Before they're on Rogan's podcast, they're on this show, and many others. And we're all contributing to this battle, because I always say, people say like, oh, what can I do? It's like just sparking the conversation. Yes. And just not being afraid to have these discussions. Like prior to 2020, like you say that Bill Gates is linked to eugenics, people look at you like you're Alex Jones, and then now you say it and they're like, yeah, there's something weird about that guy. It's like, yeah, so it's like, in a way, I do feel like people are opening up to these discussions and opening up to the history of eugenics and the possibility of these ideologies, and the possibility of the World Economic Forum trying to mold the world in the way they would like it. And it's like, since the beginning of time, there's always been people, and there's always been people who want to control those people. Like, that's always happened. I don't know why we think that we live in a world where that doesn't exist. There's always been empires and fall of empires and people taking over territories and other tribes and all this stuff. It's like, that's always happened. Now we live in this illusion that we think like it's not happening, but it's all like, it's proxy wars. It's not direct anymore. And it makes it easier or harder for people to kind of see what's going on. But yeah, I mean, we need people like yourself who are willing to speak out, especially be there firsthand and see things and be outspoken, and then also connected to the bigger, the bigger picture. and taking a step back, I know I had Michael Millerman on my show. He's from Canada. He's known as his claim to fame was that he was the first one to translate Alexander Dugin's writing. And are you familiar with Alexander Dugin? They call him Putin's brain. Yeah. And so Michael Millerman and Alexander Dugin, something you said reminded me of their work. When I talked to Michael Millerman, we talked about this, about how not that Putin's a good guy, and not that, I agree with all of Russian geopolitical actions and their perspective on the world, but there does seem to be something there when discussing the fact that Russia pushes back a little bit against this this almost like decaying of culture, right? Like in the West, it's like, hey, it's a melting pot. By the way, in that pot, everything's melted and there's nothing left. Like, we just want to remove all culture and we want to create a new one of confusion and nobody being connected to traditions or morals, or and everything's up for debate. And Russia seems to be one of the only world powers that are pushing back against it. My country in Portugal and much of Western Europe is becoming brainwashed and kind of been overtaken by these ideologies, but Russia seems to push back. Do you think there's anything to that?
So yes. Again, it's another large piece of a puzzle. So right before this, I did a report for someone. Give a shout out to them. They're not affiliated with, but it's a very good YouTube channel, S2 Underground. There's a couple fan pages that exist for guys who just want pure intelligence, and some of the guys know me. Asked me to look into the Mirotovitz list, the Russian kill list. Obviously they know I have contacts, I have credible work out there in the community. So I am a relied upon source of information. I looked into the list, and the farther I went down that rabbit hole, I had to follow the money. And it's all tied to Kolomoisky, one of the chief oligarchs in Ukraine. You want to talk about who influenced the U.S. election and power in Washington, D.C.? It's the Ukrainians. You want to talk about where our culture started shifting? It's Covertel 95, when Zelensky formed his production company in 2003 and then 2005. All the money goes back to banks in Cyprus, British Virgin Islands, and London, and they're all tied together. All of them. In the report, I tied it together circularly. And it all ties back to Zelensky and Biden through Sunset Oil Resources or something. It's a Delaware company that gave to Biden's firms, and Hunter Biden met. I told him, I was like, I'm breaking out the Pava grenades and everything, because at this point in time, I think we just backdoored the Hunter Biden laptop with this one. It's all tied to the Ukrainian oligarchs. And then OSW, Polish intelligence, the civilian branch of a Polish intelligence unit that works on Ukrainian and Russian affairs, stated that, I believe this was in 2014, they published this report, that the oligarchical structure inside of Ukraine was trying to disrupt and disbalance the power within Ukraine as well as Washington, D.C. And that got swept right under the rug. Russia has had credible intelligence of genocide and ethnic cleansing in Luhansk and Donetsk, as well as Arsen Avakov's ties to the Armenian mafia and human trafficking, as well as organ trafficking, more specifically sex trafficking young women. Because let's be completely honest, as much as the woke culture wants to say that there's white privilege, the most sought after women in human trafficking are blonde, blue-eyed white women. And they primarily go to the Middle East as well as Asia, the Saudi royal family specifically. So Russia had that intelligence. Arsen Avakov is associated with it, and he is tied to private bank, which is Kolomoisky's bank, which is tied to multiple accounts and law firms such as TNM, which is a front for the 74th Intellectual and Psychological Division of the Ukrainian military, as well as the Azov Battalion and Mirotovitz. That entire list isn't just a kill list, it's also a targeted sexual list. Russia found families that were killed and put in ditches who were registered who had children, but there's no child-size remains. The children are just gone. Russian intelligence has information, credible information, that these children, depending on how young they were, thanks to Arsen Avakov, who was the Minister of the Interior, would get papers stating that these children are these particular people or this person's child, so on and so forth, and that is how they would be smuggled. These smuggling routes go through it's made easier by a corporate lawyer named Andreas Sophocles out of Cyprus. Coincidentally, just out of Cyprus. Everything goes through Cyprus and the TRNC because it's just so easy to break the laws there. And it's all circularly tied in. Russian intelligence has had this. The problem in the West is we don't get to hear the Russian side. And the problem in the West is we're still stuck in the Cold War mindset. And I've had to tell multiple people this. Just because Vladimir Putin was KGB, just because Vladimir Putin grew up during the Cold War, does not mean Vladimir Putin still has the Soviet-era mentality. Is he a dictator? Sure. Is he an asshole? On some things, sure. Does Russia know how to tie up their loose ends and leaks? Oh, absolutely they do. Novichok seems to be the traditional drink instead of vodka over there. But is Russia the bad guy in this situation? No. No, they're not. The propaganda literally started in Ukraine, and then when Barack Obama signed the Smith-Mundt Act, you hear a lot of people in 2012 say, well, that's when they repealed the ban on propaganda. That's not really what the law says, but what it says is that the media can now broadcast things that are made by the government or the DOD, which, let's be honest, is propaganda. Did you watch the new Top Gun Maverick? It's straight up propaganda, but it was good propaganda. I don't care. If you grew up watching Top Gun, it was worth it. The thing is can you see through it? We are so heavily censored here in this country that when you have podcasters like yourself, Joe Rogan, you mentioned a couple of the doctors on who I am absolutely intimately familiar with, working through COVID. And I'm very, very happy for that. Smaller creators like S2 Underground, on Twitter like Evergreen, OSINT, Open Source Intelligence. The thing is everybody thought being a part of a resistance in America would be picking up your gun, going street to street fighting. And it's not. This is an intelligence war. And unfortunately, I'll be the first one to say it because I can admit it. The only way we can correct the issue and the only way that we can actually win the war is to admit that we're losing it right now. It's a difficult task. And my wife even worries. You know what I mean? She makes the joke haphazardly sometimes that, she's just waiting for the day that they find my body in a ditch. And that's a very good reality. It's happened. I can show you the people who came out during COVID in 2020 it was a hit. Textbook intelligence hit. Cutouts and everything. So does Russia have a leg up here? Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. Because morally, they're still a cohesive culture. We are not. You know what I mean? Here in America, if you had said something earlier that I think is relevant to this situation, is you had said if Americans were to go somewhere else, they would have an eye-opening revelation. So I'm half and half. My father's Native American and my mother's Jewish, okay? So if anybody would understand racism, I'm seasonal. We have that one German ancestor in our bloodline that gives me the blue eyes. It just seems like the Germans get in and just take over everything. It's even genetic. But if I go overseas to Germany or Lithuania or even Russia, I've been to Russia numerous times, and I tell them I'm Jewish or Native, there's no racism. There's no they, them pronouns. There's no nothing. They're just like, oh, okay, that's cool. That's cool. There's this Russian Jew, or here's the chief rabbi, or here's the synagogues, or I have friends in Budapest, Hungary, and Hungary is one of the most racist nations ever, especially against Jews, but yet they'll take me on walking tours with them and show me the synagogues and everything. You know what I mean? And here in America, mention you're Jewish, and it's every conspiracy theory, Jewish space lasers, or your family has Jew gold. It's just ridiculous how we have let the algorithm and the propaganda that is being perpetuated rip our society apart, when you can say I'm a devout follower of my faith, I do believe in a God, I believe in inclusiveness, and you're a terrorist, you're a domestic terrorist. I fly a Gadsden flag out front my house. That makes me a domestic terrorist by the FBI. Like, you can't win. You can't win. So, yes, sir. I mean, to answer that question is just it's so difficult because there's so many layers to this thing. It's like an onion. In the intelligence field, we talk about the onion a lot, where you peel back more and more and more, but there's always a secret. There's always something deeper to be dug to. And that's what we're living in. That's the world we exist in. I mean, I was still working when I first met my wife. She's significantly younger than me, but she was in college. And I met her in her dorm room, and we were talking about getting together. And I told her, I said, as long as you're okay and accept the fact that I'm going to have to lie to you every now and then, that there's lies, but lies that serve the service. There's lying and then lies that serve the service. We would be okay. And that's the reality of what guys like me and what others live through and have gone through is, you know, I reflect on it now, everything that I gave up, the friends, the family, the lies, the all of it, to get to this point, did I help perpetuate it? Did I help bring this in because of the actions that I partook in North Africa, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and other places? When these people were saying what was coming, these people told us what was going to happen, including some imams overseas that we absolutely liquidated. Did they know? Because the Russians sure knew. That's why they invaded in 2014. That's why they invaded this time. So I think there's a lot of hard questions that everyone in America needs to sit in front of a mirror at this point and ask themselves. Because we've all chosen our sides. But that's the problem. It's an illusion. The world you live in, the one of cell phones and bills and is my friend Becky fucking my boyfriend and student loans, that's the lie. That's the lie you live. The real world, darkroom deals, backroom deals. Your life is in a balance. Your way of life is in the balance. Here in the United States, you see the posts online, you see them on TikTok, you see the controlled opposition with the muscly oiled dudes and the cigars just shooting stuff on a range. Okay, you were probably a 31 Bravo, okay? You were probably some type of Remph. It's all geared to keep you entertained and keep you separated and keep you hating each other. Because what you don't realize is your way of life is about to change even worse within the next year. All these things are escalating, and they're escalating faster and faster and faster. And that isn't a subjective truth. That's a very objective truth. If you look at the timeline for 3 years, the common citizen can see that things are just getting worse, from the inflation to food shortages to the eggs. Well, I mean, my wife really paid attention when she looked at the eggs, and they were higher than the federal minimum wage. How do you live? This is supposed to be a first world nation, and it's not. We're living third world. We're literally living in a world where all I wanted to do was come home and sit on a porch with a rocking chair and yell at kids to stay off my grass. And here I am. Not that this hasn't been a very positive experience. I've actually very much enjoyed it with you and somebody telling the truth and the story and getting it out there. But I'm dying from a service-connected TBI that's led to a seizure disorder. I know how I'm going to die. I have issues walking some mornings. My legs give out from under me. And you have me, a veteran of multiple civil service as well as military endeavors, responding to bring aid before you do as the government. That is your sole purpose for existence. And yet the younger generation wasn't there. You know who I saw there? Now, don't get me wrong, the Ohio Highway Patrol, they did have guys there later in the day, and they were younger guys, and I got to commend them, and I have to say that they did a very good job. I have the utmost respect for the East-Palestine Police Department and the Ohio Highway Patrol. But it's literally my generation, the guys who came home fucked up, that were out there, that were handing out supplies, that were trucking it in, that were bringing it in. I didn't see anybody under the age of 28. And I think that speaks volumes. I think that speaks volumes to where our society is going.
I don't know if you're familiar with Ed Dowd from BlackRock. He's been doing some interviews. He wrote the book Sudden Death, but he on a recent interview, he was I'm in talks with him about getting him on this show, but he brought up a point that I've heard other people make also about how the COVID, the whole pandemic, was a way of fast forwarding, the IDs, the the government issued crypto and basically the digital world that we all know we're eventually gonna be living in, and fast forwarding that due to covering up a economic collapse that they know is coming. And I've always had kind of mixed feelings about the virus, if it was accidentally released, if it was on purpose. Either way, I don't think it's quite as important, because either way, the elite, for lack of a better term, would use it in their benefit, to benefit their agendas. So if it was accidental, they would take advantage of it. If it was on purpose, they would take advantage of it, or be a part of it.
Right.
But do you think there's something to that, this idea of some type of economic collapse that is right around the corner? And go ahead. It sounds like you got some opinions on this.
Unfortunately, you're touching on papers that I've absolutely written, but I wrote them in 2020. How our economy has functioned here in the United States since 2008, since the first collapse, and stayed afloat, I have no clue. I have absolutely no clue. You can't pump as much stimulus as we did into an economy and expect it to stay afloat. The ups and downs that we're seeing now, there is a little bit to say something to controlled collapse. I don't think we're absolutely going to collapse. I think it's going to be a controlled collapse. It's going to be a controlled descent into chaos. I do agree with, what would you say his name was, Dowd?
Yeah, Edward Dowd. He's he wrote the book Sudden Death. He was a BlackRock guy. He basically, started gathering all these numbers with this incredible increase in spontaneous deaths and what would be healthy people, and gathered information from health insurance companies and life insurance companies and all this stuff. And basically, and he's basically making the case that without a doubt, since the introduction of this experimental RNA, mRNA technology, I hesitate to call it a vaccine, because I think using the word vaccine is it's great marketing, because people have less fear in taking a vaccine than they would in taking something that's gene therapy. But since the introduction of it, there's just been an incredible increase in athlete deaths and all this stuff. So he's kind of making the rounds, doing his interviews. I think his most recent one was with Patrick Bet-David, which was a good interview. He's been on the Aubrey Marcus podcast. He's been on quite a few, and he's basically a numbers guy. And he's like, you can't deny these numbers. You can argue what caused these things, but it's like, if you're a open-minded, honest person, you can't ignore the fact that we were a part of a experiment, and we put out a technology to the public that has never been correctly tested or approved before, and obviously all this stuff. So it's it definitely seems like it could be all related. That either they were a part of push. I mean, there was Event 201 that happened in late 2019. I'm sure you're familiar with it, with the World Economic Forum and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and John Hopkins. And so you look at like that stuff, and then the fact that it played out almost identically to the way that they thought it was going to play out. That's why it was funny when people would say, well, they couldn't prepare for this. They didn't. And it's like, they literally didn't just they could have prepared for it, because they literally created the exact scenario how it played out the year previously. And then you look at all the people who were making money from this, people who were buying tests and were already investing in testing and COVID tests and all this other technology that would obviously be profitable after the pandemic. So it definitely seems like there's a lot more going on there. Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah. Now I forget.
If you'd like, one of the things. I'm sorry. Didn't mean
No,
to
no, no.
interrupt you.
I ranted for so long I forgot what question I asked you.
You asked me about the virus being released intentionally or unintentionally, and if it was to usher in something faster. Again, multi-layered, but I don't think this is an angle that I've seen anybody attack this from in the beginning. Let's attack it from. I started as an 11 Bravo. I was an infantryman. Okay, let's sand table this. Event 201 was a sand table. Okay, it was literally the tactical planning and execution of the mission. Okay, so you set your parameters, you get your things in place, you figure out what can go wrong, because to the veterans who probably watch your show, we'd rather die 12 times on paper than once in reality, right? Right? The same thing. So let's take a step back and look at this as warfare. Okay, we have multiple Chinese individuals arrested at airports in 2019 carrying biological material out of Harvard or the Boston area, your area in Massachusetts, I believe. Apprehended in Seattle and I think Newark, New Jersey, carrying this stuff wrapped in socks. We know for a fact that the professor at Harvard was arrested by the FBI. Nothing outside of that was ever released. Okay, so there is, and then with Fauci in 2017, so on and so forth, pay attention to words, okay? In an investigation and an intelligence operation, words matter. Fauci told you in 2017 there's going to be a pandemic in Trump's time, okay? Told you, straight up. Event 201, told you, straight up, what was going to happen. The problem is the average citizen can't understand why a government would wage war against you. Easy. One, your government is run by criminals, okay? Two, all the militaries in the world combined do not have enough guns to outmatch the U.S. citizen, okay? It's not going to happen. The United States population is the most heavily armed military in the world. If we really wanted to solve the Russian situation in Ukraine, take every registered hunter in Pennsylvania, send them over there, they're going to shoot twice and come home, okay? The United States can field so many snipers on a battlefield that do nothing but wait in a tree stand for hours on end to maybe hit a deer in the most adverse conditions and still nail that thing 200 yards out. What standing military is going to be able to stand up against that? Add to the fact that we have 22 million veterans in the population right now. A lot of those guys come back who are just like me, who, and we need to clear this up for anybody watching, I am anti-establishment, not anti-government. I believe that the United States government, by the Constitution, is the best form of government ever created by man. I'm anti-parking your ass in a seat for 40 years and becoming a millionaire by lobbyists. That's what I'm against. So if you want to expand your global reach, you want to bring in globalism, you want to expand your power and your money and your assets, okay? All wars are about what? Resources, right? So you're turning the human being into resources. They already did this with the credit card and debt system, okay? But now we need to control the resource. We need to take more from you and give it to us. We saw it through COVID. The largest redistribution of wealth went from the poorest to the highest, okay? Now, how do you keep those people in class? Because there are so many poor mouths to be fed, to be clothed, to be taken care of, that a global uprising would be an issue, okay? But the easiest way to do it, and if we think about it, when we look at our scientists would say that there'd be no way that alien, let's say alien invasion movies would be a thing. The aliens would just wipe us out from orbit with a biological weapon, right? Why take the risk if you can wipe out your enemy with a biological weapon? So that concept came from our brightest minds. So why wouldn't they apply it to you? But here's the problem. If you engineer a biological weapon, then you have to have a vaccine in place. But if the vaccine can't be put in place because it's an experimental vaccine, and or the virus has to be forever changing to either become more lethal or so that you can alter it to be more lethal, then you can't just have the vaccine for yourself and then hand out placebos. Okay? I mean, you could probably, but the problem is that first pandemic, had it been as bad as it would have absolutely devastated the globe. So how do you cushion your markets, keep your elite in power, and keep the economies afloat? Well, you need to dwindle the herd, right? You need to down it slowly over time. So COVID comes out. It was the Alpha variant, I believe, the Delta variant or whatever it was at the time, was bad. Like, it was very, very, very bad, but it mutated fast down. But the propaganda kept going. The scare tactics kept going and going and going and going. So everybody's masking, everybody's staying indoors. So now they know they can lock you down. Now they know that they can bring in 15-minute cities, move people to cities, okay? So now they come out with a vaccine. We're gonna have a vaccine. We're gonna create a vaccine in warp speed, warp time. That's not how vaccines work. If you do your research into the SARS-CoV-1 outbreak and research that vaccine, it killed almost every single experimental animal that they used. And people are like, well, people aren't mice. To those people, I say, dear, why do you think they use mice? They're humanized mice. Like, there's a reason we use them in trials for vaccines and things like that. So how can you take a vaccine that you gave up on because it was killing your test animals and create one in less than 8 months and call it safe? We knew there was issues wrong with the vaccine. And if you're taking that spike protein, the same spike protein that causes myocarditis, pericarditis, and multiple issues, and then use that spike protein, that's going to cause the same issues that the virus itself caused, if it caused that. Because I had COVID naturally. I didn't have issues. I had like a couple months where I had problems, but I went right back to the gym after getting COVID. But now you have a vaccine that's given to people. They need boosters, constant boosters, constant boosters. The mRNA itself is absolutely liquidating and destroying the DNA within a subject. It's destroying the immune system. It's causing the exact comorbid conditions that the first strain of COVID targeted and took out those people. So now you have this push. We have to get the world vaccinated to 70% by 2023. Why? Or was it 2022? One of those years. The question always was why? Why was it? And the reason being, because now, if you have a population, strategically, now mind you, this is all hypothetical, we're sand tabling this at the moment. If you have a population of immunocompromised people that are prone to or have had pericarditis or adverse reactions, and I can say this because my wife was vaccinated and she has adverse reactions, the next time a virus is introduced that's even half as lethal as COVID, imagine the death toll that comes from that. Imagine the people who are dying suddenly now from the blood clots, from pericarditis, from the athletes who are just dropping over. You're watching them die slowly, 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 so that the next time the next pandemic comes around, you've cushioned your economies, you've put in place the infrastructure to ensure that you can move to a digital dollar, digital currency, digital ID, a global concept. And then when you kill off the rest of them, what's going to be left? Do you think, after all of this, that you would want to pick up a rifle and resist somebody when you just watched your wife, your mother, your father, your brother, everybody die around you, slowly but surely? If you look at it in that mind frame, if you look at it militarily, as if we are at war, it makes perfect and utter sense.
Did you watch the film White Noise?
No.
Did you hear about the similarities?
No. Is it like a horror movie? Because if it's horror, then I'd probably watch it.
Actually, I don't believe it is. I believe it's like some type of drama. It was. I was just curious because I know that you obviously know this stuff in detail. So there's some people who watched White Noise, and apparently either the film took place in that area or they filmed the film in that area, and like Event 201 and, a lot of other things, like you look at PNAC and Project for New American Century and talking about New Pearl Harbor before 9/11s, it seems like a lot of times, like, they're like planting the seed of like, this is what's going to happen. Like, we're going to expose you to a little bit of what's down the road. So I was just wondering if it was a Event 201 type of scenario where they actually released a film that was similar to it, or if it was just a coincidence. Unfortunately, when you go down these rabbit holes long enough, stop believing in coincidences a long time ago.
Yeah. No, planned programming and perception management, there's been perception management firms, God, for years now. That is a thing. That's absolutely a thing. When you're conditioned to accept something, or look at the movie that I saw when I had COVID. It was hilarious because when I had COVID, I took care of myself. I was sick as a dog for 3 weeks. I was watching horror movies and I watched Contagion. Good movie, but you could absolutely say planned programming. Absolutely, right down to the what was it called, Forsythia or whatever it was. And it was like, here we are telling you the same thing. Supplements work. my mortar and pestle's right behind me. I just took care of somebody today mixing what we call M21 as our intervention up for somebody who's sick. And you realize you can go down these rabbit holes, but like I tell everybody, don't become paranoid to the point that you start seeing coincidences in everything, because then you're your own worst enemy and you're everybody else's enemy at that point too. That's how you get extremists. Some shit, don't attribute it to malice when it's just ignorance. Unfortunately, though, everything that we're living through within the last 3 years, there is a planned process to it. Everything is about control and flow of information for right now, and what you don't see. The biggest issue is that too many people don't see it. And if they did, let's be honest, not many people would stand up. We saw that during COVID. That was the test run. That was the trial. Then the vaccines, and then the vaccine mandates, and then the cards. I mean, I think if more Americans hadn't pushed back and more Europeans hadn't pushed back, I think we would already been into a digital ID and vaccine passport at this point.
Yeah, I was happy to see the amount of pushback. I mean, obviously, I've had many people on the show from Canada, and we talked about what was going on there, and then the obviously the truckers and how everybody stood up, and it was a beautiful thing when everybody came together. But to me, even though I was happy with like people finally pushing back, I was stunned by how far they let it get to before pushing back. To me, it was like, okay, stay home for a couple weeks, then stay home for a couple months. Now, like, make every aspect of your life inconvenient. And I would constantly tell people, I'm like, look around you. And see, I've been down the rabbit hole of vaccines for a long time. I've had Dr. Brian Hooker on the show, who was a part of the CDC whistleblower story connected to the MMR vaccine. I've had, I've been really big in homeopathic medicines, and really, I think the body's an amazing tool. And I think Mother Nature gives you all the things you really need to really be healthy and happy and live as best as you can. A lot of times it's, we're deficient in something, and it usually we can get vitamins or minerals or supplemented in some way and kind of help it out. And that should be the first resort, and any type of synthetic medicine should be a last resort, but typically that's not the way the world works anymore. Now it's, your doctors become your drug dealer, where it's just like, I forget what was it, if it was Bill Maher or who was it that said, before you used to go to the doctors and they used to tell you what to take, and now you go to the doctors and you ask them for the drugs you want, and he's like, now your doctors become your drug dealer. It's like going to your,
yes,
the guy who used to sell you weed and be like, hey, can you get me this? Can you get me? That's like literally what patients are doing now. They're going to their doctor and like, hey, I saw this commercial. Can you get me this? Can you get me that? But yeah, so it's fascinating, and I try to be optimistic. I remember when the Jeffrey you hit on the child trafficking and that type of stuff. I've been down those rabbit holes too with Craig Sawman Sawyer, who did the documentary Contraland, and he helps traffic kids, and I've done podcasts with actually Nick Bryant was just on the show again for the second time. He wrote the book The Franklin Scandal, which was really, really good, and he goes, we were talking about Jeffrey Epstein years ago, and I remember the first time he was on the show talking about Jeffrey Epstein and all the links to the elite and all this stuff, and people would look at you like you're fucking crazy. And then he became a household name, which was like, I thought was a giant W. I'm like, wow. I'm like, people are actually accepting how dark of a reality we actually live in. I'm like, that this could be possible, that that everybody knew this guy was gonna have a mysterious death. He did it. It was an obvious cover up. Nobody's asking any more questions. None of his books are login. Nothing is being exposed. None of the elites he's connected to are being exposed. And throughout history, you've seen this over and over again. You saw the same thing with Jimmy Savile in the UK, and you would think like, oh my God, this is going to open people's minds, because if you think one of the worst crimes that anybody could do, you would think pedophilia, child rape,
yes,
child trafficking. And to think that there's these elites Bill Gates, Bill Clinton, Alan Dershowitz, all these people connected to this guy, all the people in politics, all the people in science, all the people all over the place that are connected to this guy, and many of us in the alternative media world knew what Epstein was up to and some of the things he's been connected with. It's like these rich elite people must have heard these rumors, and yet they still hung out with them. They were either participating or they're incredibly naive, one of the two. And yet, like, this becoming a household name, I'm like, this is going to open people's minds to many other things. Like, if this is possible, what couldn't be possible? And then COVID came around, and this idea that they would force feed you, make everything such an inconvenience that they're like, oh, we didn't mandate the vaccine. Yeah, you did, because if kids wanted to go back to school, at most universities, you had to be vaccinated. You want to go back to work and pay your bills and feed your family, you got to be vaccinated. They made it such an inconvenience. And then because it was emergency authorization, the vaccine companies couldn't market their products.
Yes.
So they didn't need to, because I got kicked off YouTube for medical misinformation when I had actual PhDs and people who were experts in these fields, giving their opinions and information. And yet Biden and all these other people are on TV saying things that turn out to be completely undeniably untrue, like the vaccine was going to stop people from getting it. It was going to stop people from spreading it. All this nonsense, how well masks worked, like all this nonsense. And yet, like, we just move on, like, let's just move on. Like, it's almost like every war just about we get involved in. It's like, Vietnam, we're like, yeah, we messed up, let's move on. And then it's like, then we fall for the same trick in Iraq. Then we fall for the same trick, in Syria. Then we fall for the same trick, over and over again. Like you said, with the Ukraine, this idea of like, we're the good guys, and there's only one side to the story, and the other side, you don't need to hear it because we're the good guys, and that's, to me, it just, I guess my point is, like, there's these moments where I have faith and hope in civilization, because I'm like, oh my God, like, people are opening up to the reality of things. And then they fall for the same trick again. And and then that's where I get discouraged. And that's where I go from optimistic to pessimistic. And I'm like, are we ever going to wake up enough? But this goes to something you previously said, the dumbing down of America. This all starts with our kids. Like, you create people who don't ever question authority. Don't ever, my parents are still the same way. We're like, they were raised in a world where you respected your priests, you respected your doctors, like, they were people that would never harm you on purpose. And you go to them for information, and you respect their authority and their knowledge and wisdom. And you grow up that way, where, like, you never push back, you never go against the grain. And if you do those things, if you just regurgitate what's on a test, and you play along, you'll get the white picket fence, and you'll get that nice job, and you'll have a nice home with a nice family, and you'll be happy. All you have to do is play in our corrupt system and ignore all the corruption. And it just, again, it's something we were talking about before we started recording. The importance of not just homeschooling, like, some people can't or don't want to, or think it's just too much work, but the importance of unschooling and like really talking to your kids about, like, what were you taught at school? Don't think that, like, that teacher that, you have a teacher parent conference and they're like, oh, they seem nice. It's like, they do, but they also believe that whatever ideology they're pushing is the right ideology, and it's what's best for society and for your kid. And you might not agree with that ideology. And, like, in many cases, sometimes we have to remind ourselves that the person sometimes you're disagreeing with think they're as right as you think you're right. And they think that, they're pushing for a greater good, just like you think you're pushing for a greater good. So even if, like, teachers and public schooling or whatever, like, it seems like there's some good people there, you should still be involved in the molding of your kids' worldview. Kids are curious. They can be raised in an environment where they think meat is evil, and and you know, and you should only be a vegetarian and meat is evil, and you raise them in that environment, that's what they're going to believe. That's their worldview. You raise them in an environment where you understand that Mother Nature, we're all a part of it, and we all contribute to it, and life eats life to survive, and you know, there is a process, like we have to kill things. It doesn't mean you don't love those animals. My parents were farmers growing up. When I was young, I was a little confused about, like, they would take the time. I'm like, I would tell my mom and my dad in Portuguese, I'd be like, you guys can go to a grocery store and buy this. Why do you spend all this time raising the animals, feeding the animals, making sure they're not sick, making sure that some fox or coyote doesn't kill your chickens? I mean, my parents would like be upset when like some random animal came and killed their animals. And I'm like, weren't you going to kill them anyways? But, you know, it was like I was young and I didn't understand that. I'm like, no, they do have a love for these animals. That's why they're raising them. But they also understand it's a part of the process. Like, you know, I'm going to raise them. I'm going to give them probably a better quality of life than when they're in these factory farms.
Yes.
And then eventually, you know, it just, for me to survive, we must kill something to eat. And I always used to make the argument. I'm like, if vegetables had mouths and they could scream while you're chewing on them, I'm like, maybe we would be looking at it at the same way. Because I'm like, there's all this new research about how plants might be way more intelligent than we thought. And it's like, just because they don't look human-like, they don't have eyes and mouths and they can't talk, we can't see them suffering or whatever it may be, we can't relate to them suffering, then we're like okay with eating that life. But at the end of the day, it's all life eating life to survive. Like it doesn't matter if it's a plant or an animal, but this connection to Mother Nature and this connection to you know, and you probably can relate to this based on some, you know, maybe both sides of your family, especially the Native American kind of worldview of like, you know, how we're all one. And we talked about George Carlin and like growing up, and I remember hearing this very hippie, it seemed like a very hippie ideology, like we're all one. And I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? And then you realize like, okay, well, one day I'm going to die, and then my ashes, whatever, is going to disintegrate into the earth. I'm going to be, you know, nutrition in that earth that will grow into grass. Some animal's going to eat that grass. I'm going to help, you know, bring nutrition to that animal, which eventually will die and be eaten by another animal. Like we're all like just recycled and a part of this world. And when you look at it that way, you're much more sympathetic to people that you disagree with and people that might be different, and you know, people that are what we create the other. I don't know if you've been in the military, it seems, and not to get any details of that because I don't want to give your identity away, but I don't know if you ever watched the Black Mirror episode, where Black Mirror was a UK series, very good series. They had an episode where they had these military guys who were seeing these like I don't know if they're like aliens or monsters, and they were basically trained and operated to kill these monsters that were the bad guys. And then somewhere in the show, eventually you realize that the military was drugged, and that person that they were killing wasn't a monster. It was an illusion that these drugs were giving them that they were monsters, and they were just people. And then once that drug went away, it got out of your system, and you could see who you were killing and who you're fighting, and they look like you. Then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, like this was a way of getting me to dislike this other person, creating the other, yes. Right? And you see it with, you know, in movies, like you talked about in movies, you see that in the 90s, where we're similar in age. Like back in the day, it seemed like a lot of movies, the bad guy was always like Middle Eastern, you know, and then the bad guy was always Russian. The bad guy was, it's like we're painting them as the other. So, and then when we have to, you know, justify a war or a battle or you know, or they're trying to get us to digest some war propaganda, it's much easier because what they've done, they've already kind of helped mold that worldview where it's just like all these films and entertainment has already created this image that they're the other, they're the bad guy. And so, you know, that's why it's a scary freaking world we live in, because like you said, it's not just the obvious stuff, but there's all these little, like, you know, the Edward Bernays, right? These techniques of understanding that our decision making and what there's so many other influences that affects our decision making, the way we look at the world, that we're not even aware of. You know, there's a lot of psychology that goes into this, and you know, most of us, like you said, we're just on TikTok trying to find a way to kill some time and not realizing that there's all these other things in play.
But look at something you just said that I have to jump in here, and pardon me, I'm not trying to be rude, is when we discuss perception management and creating the other, what a lot of people don't realize is how fast they give into it and what's going on here. It's we call it the boomerang effect. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of that. Okay, the way we fought our wars overseas, counterinsurgency, counterterror, every single war, the technology has always come back to roost here at home. Okay, so the way we were fighting the war there, the biometric scanning, everything like that, it's come here now. Okay, and the way that we identified our issues, if we want to consolidate control of an area, like I had said before, I2D2 is the easiest way to remember this. Okay, you don't understand how you are being conditioned every single day. When we look at the United States and we look back through our history, we understand that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated because he was a civil rights leader. He spoke out. He was assassinated. Malcolm X, when he changed from that hard line to a more encompassing line after going on Hajj, he was killed. That's not the only reason we don't have American leadership right now. That's not the only reason I hide my face. You know, a lot of people, including the gentleman who introduced us, understands. He asked me the one time, why do you wear a mask? And the simple reason is because I'm not a coward. I want to live. That's the thing you don't understand. This goes deep. Look at what has happened in the United States. When we talk about TikTok, we talk about, look at your TVs. What was it? Toddlers and Tiaras started it. And then you had drag kids and all this stuff. And now drag time story hours at libraries, bars, things like that. And we've all seen the videos. We don't need to rehash that. We can't criticize those people, okay? But yet on Capitol Hill, the accusations fly that this person's a sex trafficker, this person's a sex trafficker. When Elon Musk came out and said that he was going to buy Twitter, I had told a couple guys in some of the units that I'm with and in some groups that I'm a member with, I said, you just wait. I said, he's going to be accused of something sexual. I promise you that. And sure enough, he was. If you remember, some intern was supposedly come out and said he did something 25 years ago. The reality is if that would have happened to Elon Musk as a citizen in the United States trying to speak out, he would have went to prison for 10 years. Okay? They are dumbing down the word pedophilia because they're using it for everybody. Even on Capitol Hill, they sling that word around like it has no weight whatsoever. And remember what I told you, in intelligence and investigations, words matter. At this point, it's not about the word being used, it's about the fact it's becoming a household word. Actual true pedophilia by the Diagnostics and Statistics Manual, as well as the FBI's own data, is rare. Exceptionally rare. But what, since the Biden crime bill till now, are the easiest crimes to get Americans on, to disarm them? Drug laws, sex laws, and then it goes to gun laws, right? Because we're not saying that every single person that comes through, and this is a touchy subject for a lot of people, and I completely understand it. Not everyone is lying. Let's get that truth out there, okay? But if you wanted to create someone who was a villain, imagine telling somebody today you'll give them $20,000 and 3 book deals to accuse this person of something. Look what happened to Brett Kavanaugh. Look what happened to Matt Gaetz. No charges filed, no evidence presented, just like January 6th, everything collapsed once everything came to the truth of the light. It's I2D2. You identify them and you isolate them. So if an average American wanted to do an Elon Musk and stand up and fight back, what happens when the FBI with their counterintelligence and counterterrorism units come out and pay somebody? How hard would it be to manufacture a legitimate crime against somebody when we watched it happen to a sitting president? A lot of people ask the question, why isn't there American leadership? Why do we hide? Why do we not have an online presence? That's why. Because it's very, very easy. The FBI, the CIA, DHS has rooms full of federal agents that do nothing but sit and look at child pornography and send it to people. This is a fact. This is a fact of operation here. So how hard would it be to manufacture something against somebody if they truly wanted to? Look what they tried to do to Donald Trump. Look what they tried to do to Matt Gaetz. Look what they tried to do to Elon Musk. Anybody who has tried to come out, you mean to tell me anybody on the opposition side that has tried to come out, most of these people are all sex offenders, sexual rapists, misogynists, sexists? Just can't see it.
Yeah, well, you even saw it with Rogan, and we had, like I said, we have some mutual friends, people who've been on both of our shows, and including a co-host of mine on the other show, Do You Even Don't Want It? And during the election time and during the COVID lockdown time, you were seeing friends of his like Brian Callen and Brennan Schaub and other comedians in his circle all being accused of rape and all this stuff, and you see it over and over again, like in so many cases in the past where you're like, okay, was this a false flag? Is there more to this story? You find like somebody was arrested for child porn, or somebody was, and it's always like, it's not to say that these people don't exist. They do, and we know they do. But the thing is, like, it also seems like a really easy, convenient way of demonizing somebody immediately, and nobody asks any questions. It's like, okay,
correct.
How hard is it to put? I mean, if you're I've had conversations with Thomas Drake. Like I said, I've had conversations with Dr. What's his name? Jeffrey Epstein. And I mean, Dr. Epstein's episode on Rogan, I still say is one of the scariest episodes ever. And that's why I had to get him on my show, because it was just like how deep into your privacy information and everything that Google is paying attention to and manipulating is just insanity. And, even during the pandemic documentary time, when that documentary was going viral, I mean, people couldn't share the link in personal emails or DMs. His website got taken down. Mickey Willis, I mean, just hearing his story is just insane. Like the extent that they went to just censor a different opinion. And, so how hard would it be to just plant some? I mean, people have done it. Cops and investigators have done it in the past where they plant evidence. Typically, it's like physical evidence. But why couldn't they plant digital evidence? Put in, child porn on your computer or whatever. And it's like, once you get labeled as a pedophile or somebody who enjoys child porn, then everything goes out the window. Like you lose all credibility, regardless if it's true or not. So it just, to me, like, I'm always a little bit skeptical, and that world is really scary. Like, I've had this guy, he's a researcher. His name is Memory Hold.
Familiar.
He goes down some really scary rabbit holes, and he also doesn't, share his identity because of these things. But he does documentaries, and he shows all the connections between, like, child traffickers and people that, names and people that we know and all this stuff and all the symbolism. And I mean, that's like even the whole Pizzagate thing. The fact that Podesta, like he has those pictures on his wall, that artwork, and everybody just like, how do you justify that? That's not normal. I'm sure if you come to my home, or if I go into your home, or anybody else around us who seems to be a normal person, we see nothing even close to that type of controversial artwork on the wall. You look at Anthony Weiner and his laptop and all the rumors that were circulating about what was on there, and then nobody really did a full investigation on it. In the mainstream, nobody wanted to talk about it. Same thing with the Hunter Biden laptop. I mean, it just, to me, it's a huge issue, because these are the only shows that are talking about it. And I think that, the world is much darker and scarier than you would think. And then when you start going down these rabbit holes, you start figuring out like all the symbolism and all that stuff. And Jay Dyer does amazing work on this topic. With just all the Hollywood symbolism and all that stuff. And I've had Sean Stone on the show too, who did a documentary. I forget what the documentary was called. It was like, oh my God, Sean Stone's Oliver Stone's son, and he did a RT documentary on just symbolism in Hollywood. And obviously, with his dad being Oliver Stone, he obviously has a lot of good intel on how Hollywood works, and he's also a filmmaker himself. But yeah, I mean, there's all this stuff going on, and it's like, it can be a little bit overwhelming for the average person. And one thing I constantly say on this show is that we keep, like, many of us are fighting for the right to enjoy our lives, to not be manipulated, to raise our kids, have a safe environment to raise our kids in, and just basically just be live a decent life with a decent moral compass, and don't forget to do those things. It's like we're fighting for our ability to enjoy our lives without manipulation and control from outside resources. But like, we get so caught up in fighting that fight that we stop enjoying our lives. And it's like, if you do that, then they win, right? Like, if you turn into the paranoid, crazy person, like you said, who thinks everything is a conspiracy, where you think everything is manipulation, you can get to the point where it becomes impossible to logically look at things and be a person who still enjoys your life. And that's why it's helpful that my wife could care less about my podcast.
Yes.
James Corbett and I, James Corbett and I have talked about this, because his wife is the exact same. Like, there's this like love-hate relationship I have with like her take on my show. Like, sometimes I remember when I had Jesse Ventura on, how excited I was, and she's just like, "Yeah, cool. All right, did you take out the trash?" And I'm just like,
Yes.
I'm like, Jesse Ventura's going to be on my show. It's like, so to me, it's nice, because at some points I'm like, I want to be able to talk about these things and kind of bounce my ideas off somebody else and hear their perspective on it. But then in a way, I'm like, and then I never get away from it. And that can be dangerous too. So it is, I mean, did you ever find, because obviously you are very deep into all this. You spend a lot of time researching, analyzing, thinking about these things. Do you ever struggle to just check out?
When my sister passed, like, to be completely honest, like, I haven't even processed that. Like, everything that's going on, everything I've seen just in 2023 alone, like, I haven't cried, I haven't anything. Like, I just can't. I'm so numb. I've developed ulcers, I've developed, on top of the post-traumatic stress and TBI, insomnia, consistent insomnia. I don't sleep for days on end. Yeah, I've struggled with thoughts of suicide. Like, it's bad. Like, when I did the report on the Mirotovitz list, and I dug and dug and dug, I was like, my God. I take regular vacations. Like, we're going on a vacation today, you know what I mean? But this was the life that I chose when I was younger. There are tricks that we use, you know what I mean? I usually use tricks that I used to avoid personality creep. That's when I'm taking on a different profile and a name and a legend of somebody. I'm being somebody I'm not. I don't want that personality to creep into mine. I keep like a keepsake box of like things that help remind me of what's important and what is real. Like, I have one of my daughter's first socks, and I got a picture that she drew. I got one of the first notes my wife sent to me when I had to go overseas. The problem is, the world is so dark that people need hope. And I remember sitting down with my rabbi. I was not my rabbi, but a rabbi, a Chabad rabbi, in Germany. And I asked him, I laid out everything on the table, and I'm like, am I still a good guy? Am I the good guy? Am I doing what's right? And God bless this man. Like, smartest shit I've ever heard in my life. And he says, I can tell you right now, you're the good guy. He said, because the good guy doesn't ask if he's the good guy. He's like, if you still have to ask if what you're doing is correct and true and right, then you're the good guy. Because the bad ones don't care. They do it because they want to, because it feels good, because sin is easy. Doing what's right is not. And that's the way I was raised ever since the never again thing, is like to be a light in the darkness. When we celebrate Hanukkah, I tell my daughter all the time, like, it's not just about the oil in the lamp. It's not just about the victory of a small force against a big force. It's the fact that no matter how dark it is, your responsibility as a Jew is to be the light in the dark so others can find it. And unfortunately, that same rabbi told me one of the best things that I carry with me is that sometimes there are those of us in this world, for whatever reason that Hashem deems, must walk in the dark so that others may know the light. We must eat all of that sin and expose it so that others know what righteousness is. And I have heard no truer words in my entire life, and that's what we're doing here, and that's what I bring to the arm units in our area, is the same concept, that same philosophical maxim, is just be the light. Because if we don't do it, who is? Ethics of the Father. If not me, then who? If not now, then when? And I talked to my grandfather. He's still alive. He's a World War II vet, 8th Air Force. I look at my dad, Gen X, and I've had multiple conversations about this and the health-related issues that are coming from this and the mental health issues that come from it. I'm holding up pretty good. I don't know how I'm doing it, but there's a lot of animosity, though. I'm not going to lie, because my grandfather's generation, I understand. Like, you're the greatest generation. You fought the fight. I look at the Gen Xers like my dad, and I'm like, this was your fight. This was your fight, and you kicked it down the fucking road for us. You know what I mean? The most highest educated generation in history, and yet we're poorer than our parents. There's no way me and my wife will ever be able to retire. Possibly never own our own home. Like, we're fucked. The pandemic destroyed us. It did exactly what it was supposed to do, but it didn't stop my will to fight. I may be in the dark, but I'll be a candle. If I'm the only candle that's lit, then so be it. But I'm not. And I think that's the same way that, people like you, people like Joe, even some other content creators along my line, like Grand Thumb, guys like Project Gecko, S2 Underground, like, those are the vocal lights. You guys are online. Like, that's where you should be. Take your time. Like, that's where you have to be. Whereas guys like me, the people that it's very easy to hem up, the people that it's very easy to make go away, we got to stay hidden. Our stories don't always come out, but they're the stories that need to be told. And I think a lot of people in America want to check out because they don't see hope. But we're there. We're just in the dark, and that's where we have to be. And in the darkness is where the light shines the brightest, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a great way of ending this conversation. Also, knowing that your vacay starts today, I feel like a jerk keeping you for 2 hours.
You're fine. No. She's at work. Like I said, she's a teacher, so she's already sent me a text complaining about the kids today. So I'm like, well, we're going on vacation. You're going to be fine. Don't worry about it. It's good.
And we need that. We need to be able to disconnect from all this and love and laugh and enjoy. And that's really the things that we're fighting for in the first place. I mean, it's in my personal life, I'm one of the people that I always try to be in a positive mood and always smiling and like gathering people. And yet, it's similar to yourself. I'm also typically going down a lot of dark rabbit holes, but it's like those are the things I want to preserve, like my family, my friends, my community. And you're seeing a lot of people, and Adam Curry, who hosts the No Agenda show, a great show, and they did great work, especially during the COVID lockdown. And his recent appearance on the Joe Rogan podcast, because he's not a spiritual guy or religious guy, but his recent episode on the Joe Rogan podcast, he talked about a experience that I found myself kind of dealing with and kind of having the same type of experience the last couple of years when I would have people on like Dr. Carrie Madej or Dr. Peter McCullough, or all these people who were fighting against what was going on. They all seem to be religious or spiritual or something. And I'm like, why is this? I'm like, I haven't had one person who considers themselves a atheist, non-spiritual person on my show who is fighting against what's going on. And I'm just like, I guess you can only believe in pure evil if you believe in pure good. And it makes it easier to kind of understand that concept, that if you believe, that if you have this perspective on the world that there is good and evil, it's much easier to understand that people could purposely harm others. And I think people who who weren't spiritual, who weren't religious, had a hard time grasping that. Like, why would they do that? Why would they hurt people? Why would they purposely do these things? And we would constantly repeat it on this show and on my other show, The Union Unwanted, it felt like a spiritual battle. There's something like almost as a world we all could feel and sense. And it really is, and this is why the COVID lockdown and the pandemic is really, I think, the greatest event in human history.
Agreed.
Because it's the only event in human history that everybody participated in. I could talk to somebody from South America, Egypt, Australia, wherever, and everybody has their own personal story on what happened in their country, what happened to their family members, what happened to themselves, how they dealt with it, the restrictions they dealt with. Like, I could go anywhere in the world and we could discuss this. It's almost like soccer, football, right? Yeah. It's like the global sport. It's that one topic that everybody went through that trauma together as a planet. And I think it made it really unique because even, World War II, World War I, there was neutral parties or people who weren't involved. But everybody was involved. Everybody participated in this and was a part of this, this whole experiment and world change. And I remember when I would hear the term, the Great Reset and the New Normal, these terms, and I would get so upset because I'm like, resist this. And then looking back, and saying like post-COVID, because obviously there's still a lot going on, but post-COVID in regards to like a lot of the restrictions and lockdowns and stuff like that, I still feel like in a way they won, because it does seem like things aren't the way they were just 3 years ago.
But they haven't won. See, that's the important part, and I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, please do.
But they haven't won, because I'm not alone. One, I'm not alone. Even when they were coming out with the cards and the passports, like, every single person that the FBI arrested for manufacturing fake vaccine cards or giving out saline injections is a hero, is an absolute and utter hero. There are still human beings resisting this. While things look like they are changing here in rural America, it's not. It's really not. Our lives haven't changed. The only difference is how long can we hold on to it? And that's why I tell every single person that I come across, that I've met with ARM, that I work with ARM, or even Glotel, the world, whether they tell you or not, because media is not going to let you know, are looking to us as an armed populace to be that last bastion of resistance, because once it's gone, it's over. That's why Vladimir Putin himself told us, do not give up your weapons under any circumstance. This is coming from a Russian dictator where they have strict gun laws telling you not to give up your guns, because the rest of the world is looking at us to hold out. That doesn't mean use them, because violence will only hurt the right's cause at this point. Every single action and shooter that has been coming out that's a mass shooter has been tied to leftist organizations. Peace is where it's at. Those guns, just like it's enshrined in our Constitution, are a last defense, not offense. It's an intelligence war, but they are still looking at us to hold out and resist. And that's the only reason, and the only reason is because of ARM, the organization of these men and women, and I'm not even going to say me, because this is a team effort, who did everything that we could, things that we can't even mention here, to get those mandates, to get those cards, to get those passports gone. And the only thing that prevented them from squashing us like a bug is the fact that they don't know what we had. Otherwise, the entire world would have gone a totally different way.
You seem to be involved, or at least have some intel or information on a lot of these important events that happened the last 3 years. What's your perspective on January 6th? Do you, obviously it seems like it's completely being exposed as the psyop that it was. And do you have some, was that just obviously just another piece of the puzzle of the global plan of turning civilians and patriotic people into terrorists?
So I don't want to get too involved in like my military background, things like that. There are things that go back to this. Not January 6th per se, but the circumstances of an event surrounding that, so on and so forth. Like, everybody wants to talk about continuity of government con plans and stuff like that. What people don't realize is there were 3 con plans enacted under Trump when COVID started. Those con plans, as far as I still know, are still active. They have never been rescinded, which meaning any Title X agency is a federal agency, which means every single National Guard throughout the country is now a Title X agency under the Department of Homeland Security. It's about consolidation of control. I don't think we're going to have another presidential election. I think it's going to be just like the 2020 election. This was the Democratic Party's way of a consolidation of power and control. And they needed something, some type of framework in order to paint any type of American who would resist, or any type of American who loved God, country, not even guns, because let's be honest, I'm a give and take kind of guy. I served in the military. I'm not a nutter who's got 100,000 guns in my case. You know what I mean? It's a tool, like a hammer. Okay, can I hunt a deer with it? Sure. Can I fight off a tyrannical government with it? Sure. Anybody who wants to say that you can't because you need nukes and F-15s obviously forgets his disastrous retreat from Afghanistan and what they did for 20 years, but that's not my business, you know. And it was the easiest way to paint us as domestic actors and terrorists. We know that the FBI has been weaponized. We've seen their leaks come out. We know their leaks have come out. We know who they consider was a militia, violent extremist, or a possible DMV. There's so many. They love their acronyms, and I absolutely hate it. It was the easiest way. We all knew January 6th was that. Now, if you vandalized and broke glass in the Capitol and stuff, cool. Get a vandalism charge. Like, that's, if you broke a law, legitimately broke a law, but this is the people's house that's been occupied multiple times by different type of protests, and nothing happened. This was all about Donald Trump. This was all about politics. And now that we're starting to see the videos come out, the footage that we all knew existed, we have political prisoners. Like, I don't understand. I can make the case that we've been engaged in an active civil war by the definition of civil war. We've already seen political violence in the streets on both sides, shootings back and forth, the political division within the country. We've already seen people arrested, political prisoners in here. We've already seen lies and propaganda from the government and both sides. Why are we denying the fact? And it seems like my European counterparts and people that I discuss with from Israel and Russia and Hungary look at us and they're like, how do you guys not see you're in a civil war? Like, how do you not see it? Everybody understands the reality of what's happening in America except you Americans. Well, no, we see it. It's just the rest of us seem to be too stupid to understand it. Like, everybody has a concept of war from what they've seen, conditioning, right? Perception management, from what they've seen on TV, from what they, it's one battle after another, after another, after another. I was a member of the infantry. You know how rare that was? We'd get bored, throw on our fucking gear, and go do a patrol until somebody picked a fight with us. It was literally the world's biggest game of fuck around and find out. Like, it's not. And the war that you're fighting at this point is all information. It's all informational, and it's tiring, and it's ridiculous, and it's all propaganda. I cannot tell you, from Fox News to CNN to all of it. That's why I really enjoy you guys. Like, I don't watch many podcasts because I just try to avoid the reality of the world half the time because I deal with it so much. But the independent journalists, I am familiar with Tim Pool. I watch snippets of his videos, and I really do agree with a lot of what he has to say. It's really you guys that are putting media out of business. But the problem is with big tech and the algorithms and everything like that, how long before they cut you guys out too?
I said this during the COVID lockdowns. We all knew that alternative media was being censored on YouTube and on Google search results and all this stuff. But they didn't make it impossible to find the stuff we were looking for. And then as time went by, everybody was being censored. Everything was being suppressed. And it got to a point where it became so inconvenient to use those platforms because you couldn't find any of the information you wanted to find that, they almost overplayed their hand. Now you see the rise of Rockfin and Rumble and Band.video and BitChute and all these other alternative platforms that it's like, okay, yeah, there is a convenience of being able to go to the YouTube app and watch a show or a video that I like or a content creator I like on my smart TV or my Fire Stick or whatever. But nothing I like is on there anymore. So now I'll go to a web browser and go on Rumble or go on Band.video or go whatever and watch those channels. We are a creature of habit. We're used to YouTube where, so people would keep going to it. We're also, we like the path of least resistance. So it's like, okay, it's less work just to click on an app than it is to actually put a URL name in there and go to a different website or whatever. But now for people who are truly truth seekers and people who are truly looking to figure out what the hell's going on, they know YouTube's not even an option anymore. And I think they overplay their hand. And I think that because of it, that's why you're seeing, Russell Brand, for example, who, is kind of considered himself more of a leftist and all this stuff, now is basically saying the same opinions that Tim Pool is saying and and other people from the right. And Tim Pool, who doesn't consider himself a right winger either, he finds. I mean, a lot of us are politically homeless. Let's be honest. Like, there's not. I grew up being very anti-corporate companies in regards to like medicine and foods. I feel like they're just killing us with chemicals in our foods and killing us by lying to us about what the food pyramid was and or what we should be eating and lying to us about cholesterol, lying to us about high-fat diets, lying to us about all this stuff. And I'm just like, fuck corporations. I'm like, just eat and things you could kill, things you could grow, things that come off trees, come from the ground, things that don't have ingredients, and that's what the majority of your diet, what it should be. And don't believe these corporations, they all have interests. Don't believe, and it's like the anti-corporate factory farming, the anti-big pharma, a lot of times was from the left. They're the ones who were like the spiritual, oils and minerals and vitamins and all this stuff and root extracts and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden it's like they all of a sudden turn into the right in one way where they're like, corporations are the good guys. And it's just like, it just boggles my mind. We're just like, now, like, you believe big pharma, and now like you don't believe in corporate interests. You don't believe in profits being the root cause of a lot of our issues. Like, it just, to me, it's crazy because I feel like many of us, our views haven't changed, but the people who are with us, has changed. The people who have similar views have changed. And it's, to me, like the whole left-right thing, it's insanity. Somebody, a good friend of mine, Mel K, who has a show called The Mel K Show, and she talks about like preserving America, preserving, she sounds very much like this God country, patriotic type of person. And, if this was during, post-Iraq war, I would be like, you know what, like, nationalism, being patriotic can be dangerous because, like we talked about before, those type of people can buy into the other, right? That these are the enemies and these are because you're so in love with your country, you're so in love with fighting for your flag and fighting for your land, that it's easier to look at people who aren't from here as the other, and you can be kind of blinded by that alliance and loyalty to your country and flag. And that's kind of most of my upbringing. When I became politically aware, and I was very anti-war and very into geopolitics, and I'm just like, wow, man, like a lot of this is, you buy into this because of your nationalism and how patriotic you are, but then after COVID, I'm like, I was thinking at it a little differently, and I think you touched on it at some point during our discussion about how you're anti-establishment, you're not anti-government, and I started hearing the perspectives and started entertaining the idea that maybe we do have a good system. It just it's been corrupted, right? Like, it's just because somebody cheats doesn't mean the game doesn't have good rules. It just means they're not following the rules, right? And to me, like, I started seeing that perspective. We're like, oh, I get it. Like, some of this nationalism and some of this, these patriotic people, that spirit of America, maybe not what it is now, not what our government represents now, but what it should have represented and what the founding fathers were attempting to create, like that spirit is what they're fighting for and what they're in love with and what And that spirit, it's also why a lot of those patriotic, nationalistic type of people were the ones who pushed back. And because they understood that the spirit of America was, to detach from empires of Europe and to create a system where, it's fair and balanced and the people have the power. That's why we have states, right? Like the one thing that was unique about America during the COVID lockdown compared to other countries was that we had states that could kind of do what they wanted, where they're like, okay, Florida's like, well, screw you. We're not seeing the amount of deaths that you're telling us there are. So we're going to open up and we're going to, just keep eye out on things, and we're going to keep looking around and keep taking in information and looking at evidence. But we're going to do what we want. And who cares what the federal government says? Other countries aren't like that. I talk to people from other countries and they're like, whatever the prime minister says, whatever our government says, whatever our experts say, we all have to follow those same guidelines. We don't have the option to be like, let me drive over to another state. And when you look at that formula and the way they organize this country, I'm like, it was a beautiful idea, because it's like, okay, if you want to be paranoid and you think that everybody should be masked and forced to vaccinate, then you know what? Stay in your state, and I'll be able to create a parallel society and culture and environment in somewhere else. And I'm not a slave to one person's idea on how the world should be run, the federal government, for lack of a better term. So it's to me, like, that's a beautiful thing, and wanting to preserve that is really, like, I have appreciation for that I didn't have prior.
See, here's the thing, if I may interject for a second. That we have discussions. We as a group, as a cellular group, we always have discussions, share philosophy. We don't want to get stuck in echo chambers. I think so many people see the flag. Okay, I wore it on my uniforms, every single one of them. That flag, my nation, does not define me. Okay, I am a citizen under that flag. I define that flag. That flag is defined by my actions. So the America that I am trying to preserve, just like you said, when I tell people individually, like, what we're doing, and they see my actions and stuff like that, and they're like, wow, that gives me faith for America. I always remind my European friends, what you see on media and represented in our government is not America. The average American is me. The average American is every single man and woman involved in the MMUs who went to East-Palestine. That is the spirit of the Minutemen. They didn't go looking for the fight for the British. The British brought the fight to them. They were there taking care of their people. So just like faith, why, you asked, well, it seems like the patriotic, the nationalists, the spiritual ones, it's not the dogmatic ones, if you understand that. It's not the ones who just go with the dogma. It's the ones who can think freely and understand that they are not defined by their faith. They are not defined by that flag. They are the ones who do the defining of it. They are the ones who are put in the ground ultimately, who pay the ultimate price so that flag can still fly.
That's a great way of putting it. The government actions, it doesn't typically represent the people and our ideas and ideologies and all this stuff. Like we said earlier, if voting mattered, they wouldn't let us do it. We get to vote for things that don't matter as much, like the president, as we can see with our current president. If anybody ever believed that the president was the top of the pyramid of power, now you can see that there's no way this guy's making the decisions.
No, not at all.
And so it shows that, like, obviously there's a shadow government. These people behind the scenes, the people pulling the strings are typically not people that their names. It's not the people on TV doing the PR, and there is more to that. But it's without a doubt, like, we have to preserve, like, the spirit, and I think a lot of times, like you said, the rest of the world kind of looks at it as, like, if America collapses, we all collapse, and I feel like that. I think there's beautiful things about different cultures and different countries or whatever. But and I'm very proud of being Portuguese and the food I grew up eating and the language I grew up speaking and all these things. But I think there is something unique and special about America. And of course, America was was designed and created by Europeans who maybe also love their culture that they were leaving, but also saw the flaws in those things, in those countries, in those governments and those powers, and we're trying to create a system to kind of prevent history from repeating. And I think that's something we're all trying to do. And hats off to all the work you're doing. I always assumed there was people behind the scenes doing some very important work. Typically, we don't get to talk to them. Typically, we don't get to hear their story. And it was truly an honor and a privilege to hear everything you've had to offer, and all the things you're doing, and all the just really intriguing wisdom and your own personal philosophies and intel and everything else that you shared with us. It's truly been a pleasure. And the only thing that lasts longer than our bodies is our legacy, and we should all be striving to try to leave this planet a little better than we received it. And without a doubt, I think you're doing that.
Agreed.
Hopefully it inspires many other people who are listening to get off their butts and go do something, and even if it is just spark a conversation or whatever, or send them a podcast or some of the YouTube channels that you mentioned. I'll definitely be checking those out also. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you have any final thoughts, and maybe any other researchers or content creators or anywhere that you would recommend people going to keep updated on information, any suggestions, and also any final thoughts. Like I said, typically at this part of the show, I say, hey, let us know where we can find your work. But obviously, we don't want anybody to be able to find you. So,
no, not at all. Really, all I can say is thank you for giving me the time to come on here. Nobody like me. Like, I'm just the average Joe off the street. Thank our mutual acquaintance who put me in touch with you. So I will definitely be watching your show from now on, because I weigh his opinion very highly. No violence. Everybody stay peaceful. Like, that's the biggest. Anybody out there who's thinking maybe it's time, anybody who's thinking, that they could get something started, don't. Because you're only going to hurt the work that we're doing. If you want to be a part of it, get involved with the intelligence gathering, get involved with watching your local substations, your rails, making sure nobody is tampering with them. And if they do, you notify the police. Don't get involved. As long as you have a trail of record. We have these cameras now, these nifty things. You can record in a public space 24/7. You, the average citizen, is the greatest source of open source intelligence for us. And believe it or not, in intelligence agencies, back in the day, they used to have TVs lining the wall, from everything from Reuters to CNN to RT to TASS to just watching it on different time zones. Like, you would not believe how open source intelligence helps our cause. Even in the Ukraine war, when we got involved, open source intelligence really stuck it to the Russians heading into Kiev. It's always darkest before the dawn, and it's going to get rougher. It's going to get worse. But you just have to understand that there are people out there, and if it gets truly that bad, you look for the ones in the yellow berets. They're the ones who are going to help you. They might not be carrying a gun, but those are the ones who are going to help you.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. And ruthless conspiracy.
There are no Russians. There are no Arabs. There are no third worlds. There is no West.
There is only IBM and ITT and AT&T and DuPont, Dow and Exxon. Those are the nations. The world is a college of corporations. The world is a business.